This man froze an entire ocean, didn't flinch, didn't flex, didn't even stand up straight. Naruto Uzumaki said, "Your hate means absolutely nothing to me," and backed it up by turning the whole damn valley into a winter wasteland. This is not your Naruto, not even close.
The bottle shattered against his shoulder at 2:47 in the morning. It didn't bounce. It didn't crack. It hit the boy's collarbone and exploded into a spray of glass and cheap sake, and every single shard froze midair. Suspended. Crystallized. The droplets of alcohol turned into tiny diamonds of ice that clinked against the stone of the Hokage monument like wind chimes. The drunk villager who threw it stumbled backward. His hand was still extended. His mouth was open. Frost crawled across his fingertips where the bottle had left his grip, and he yanked his hand back with a yelp, shaking it wildly. The boy sitting on the fourth Hokage's stone head didn't look up. He was 7 years old. Blonde hair, blue eyes so half-lidded they might as well have been closed. He sat cross-legged on the carved stone forehead of Minato Namikaze, his chin resting in one palm, watching the frozen river far below the cliff face. Not the river that was always frozen. The river he had frozen 3 days ago. It still hadn't thawed. The fishermen were furious. The Hokage had sent 2 chunin to investigate. They came back pale and confused and talking about unnatural ice formations and sub-zero temperature anomalies inconsistent with the current season. Naruto Uzumaki yawned. The frozen glass shards fell from the air and tinkled across the ground around him like scattered teeth. A thin layer of frost spread from where he sat, coating the stone in white. His breath came out in slow, visible puffs even though it was the middle of July. The drunk man ran. Naruto didn't watch him go. He pulled the sleep mask, pushed up above his forehead like a headband, down over his eyes, leaned back against the carved stone spike of the fourth's hair, and went to sleep. Somewhere deep inside the seal on his stomach, something massive and ancient slammed a clawed fist against 6 feet of ice and roared with enough force to level mountains. "Release me, you miserable." The ice didn't crack. It didn't even vibrate. The 9-tailed fox, the most powerful tailed beast in existence, the thing that had destroyed half of Konoha 7 years ago, the walking apocalypse sealed inside a child, was buried from neck to tail in ice so cold that its own chakra couldn't melt it. Its tails were frozen individually, splayed out behind it like a peacock's display dipped in liquid nitrogen. Its massive jaws snapped at the frozen air. Steam hissed off its fur and froze again immediately. When I get out of this, the mindscape was a sewer. It was supposed to be a sewer anyway. Now it was an ice cavern. The ankle-deep water on the floor had frozen solid. The pipes along the ceiling were coated in frost. Icicles hung from the cage bars like chandeliers. A small version of Naruto, his mental projection, sat just outside the cage in a tiny lawn chair he'd imagined into existence, wearing the sleep mask, hands behind. He cracked one eye open. "Arara, you're still going? I will burn everything you love to ash. I froze you because you were loud. You're still being loud. I don't see how this gets you unfrozen." The Nine-Tails, Kurama, though neither of them used that name yet, let out a sound that was somewhere between a roar and a scream. The ice around its body didn't move, not a single crack. Kurama's fire, its hatred, its millennia of accumulated rage, all of it met absolute zero and lost. Naruto pulled the sleep mask back down. "Night. It is not night in here. There is no night in here. Let me." Naruto added another foot of ice. Kurama's screams became muffled silence. The boy slept. Here is what the village of Konohagakure knew about Naruto Uzumaki. He was the demon brat, the container of the Nine-Tails, the thing that killed their families and friends 7 years ago, wearing the skin of a blonde child. They knew he lived alone in a rundown apartment on the east side. They knew the third Hokage paid his rent and gave him a monthly stipend. They knew he was enrolled in the Ninja Academy. Here is what the village of Konohagakure did not know about Naruto Uzumaki. Everything that mattered. They didn't know that his soul was not entirely his own. That layered beneath Naruto Uzumaki, beneath the whisker marks and the blonde hair and the seal on his stomach, was something else. Something old. Not from this world. A memory that wasn't a memory. A life that wasn't quite a past life. A man who had walked across oceans by freezing them under his feet. A man who had fought gods and monsters and pirates and came out the other side not triumphant, not scarred, not vengeful, just tired. A man who believed in something he called lazy justice, which boiled down to a simple philosophy: do what's right. Don't do more than you have to. Take a nap. Admiral Kuzan, Kiji, the Iceman. Naruto didn't remember everything. It came in flashes, dreams, the taste of sea salt, the sound of ocean waves. A bicycle on a road made of frozen seawater. A man in a white coat with the kanji for justice on the back, standing on the deck of a warship, looking utterly bored while cannonballs exploded around him. These memories didn't torment Naruto. They didn't confuse him. They settled into his bones like an old coat and made him feel, for the first time in his 7 years of lonely, hated existence, calm. Completely, terrifyingly calm. The he no mi wasn't a jutsu. It wasn't a bloodline limit. It wasn't something he learned or unlocked or trained. It was what he was. His body was ice. Not metaphorically. Literally. He could become ice at will. Every cell, every molecule, shifting into frozen water and back again faster than thought. A punch passed through him. A blade split him in half and the two halves were formed without a scratch. Fire hit him and turned to steam, and the steam froze, and he was standing there untouched, while the person who attacked him tried to figure out what had just happened. He discovered this on his 5th birthday, when a particularly bold villager tried to stab him with a kitchen knife. The blade went into his chest and came out the other side. No blood, no wound, just a hole in an ice sculpture that sealed itself shut while the man stared at his hand and screamed. Naruto had looked down at the hole in his shirt, looked up at the man, and for the first time in either of his lives, he said it, Arara, just like that, slow, flat, not scared, not angry, the verbal equivalent of a shrug. Then he'd walked home, frozen the lock on his door because he'd lost the key again, crawled into bed, and slept for 14 hours. Nobody tried to stab him again after that. His haki was subtler. Observation haki, Kenbunshoku, let him feel the presence and intent of every living thing around him. It was passive, always on, like a sixth sense running in the background. He felt the villagers' hatred like a low hum. He felt the Anbu agents who watched his apartment like slightly louder hums. He felt the third Hokage's sad, complicated warmth from across the village like a candle in a dark room. He felt everything. And because he felt everything, nothing surprised him. Surprise requires not knowing. Naruto always knew. Armament haki, Busoshoku, was the other one. The hard one, the one that turned his skin into something beyond steel. He didn't use it often. He didn't need to. His Logia body handled defense automatically. But when he coated his fist in that invisible black hardening and layered absolute zero ice on top of it, when he combined the two things that no one in this world had ever seen combined, the result was a weapon that could crack mountains. He was 7. He hadn't even graduated the academy yet. And he was, without exaggeration, the most dangerous thing in the Land of Fire. The third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the god of shinobi, the professor, he figured it out slowly. The way you figure out that the stray cat sleeping on your porch might actually be a tiger. Piece by piece, report by report, the Anbu reports were the first clue. Subject Uzumaki, age 6, observed freezing the water in his bathtub solid. Method unknown. No hand seals observed. Subject appeared to be doing it unconsciously while sleeping in the tub. Subject Uzumaki, age 6.5, observed riding a rusted bicycle across the surface of the Naka River. The river froze under his tires in real time and thawed approximately 30 seconds after he passed. Subject appeared to be humming. Subject Uzumaki, age 7, confronted by 3 intoxicated civilians. Subject did not engage. Civilians' shoes froze to the ground when they approached within 10 feet. Civilians required extraction by shonen squad. Subject was asleep on a park bench during extraction. Hiruzen read these reports in his office with his pipe clenched between his teeth and his hands trembling. Not from fear, from something worse. Recognition. He had seen the Yuki clan's Hyotan, ice release, in action decades ago. This was not that. Hyotan combined water and wind nature transformations to create ice. It was a jutsu, a technique, something that could be learned, understood, countered. What Naruto did was different. His ice appeared without hand seals, without chakra molding. without any visible effort at all. It appeared because he wanted it to, and sometimes because he didn't. It didn't obey the rules of elemental ninjutsu. It didn't melt when it should. It formed in shapes and patterns that no jutsu could replicate. And it was cold, impossibly, unreasonably cold. The kind of cold that had nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fundamental absence of heat at a molecular level. Absolute zero. The Anbu sensor who'd gotten close enough to measure it had needed medical treatment for frostbite. He'd been 20 feet away. Hiruzen called Naruto into his office on a Tuesday. The boy walked in with his hands in his pockets, sleep mask on his forehead, slouching like gravity was a suggestion he'd chosen to half accept. He was tall for 7. He'd be taller. The old Hokage could already tell. Naruto, Hiruzen said carefully, I'd like to talk about what you can do. Naruto sat in the chair across from the desk. The leather frosted under him. Okay. The ice. Can you explain how it works? Naruto tilted his head, thought about it. I'm ice. Hiruzen waited for more. More did not come. You're ice. Yeah. Naruto yawned. Is that all? I was going to take a nap. Hiruzen looked at the 7-year-old boy sitting across from him. The Jinchuriki of the 9 Tails, the son of the 4th Hokage, a child who just told the most powerful ninja in the village, I'm ice, with the same energy as someone saying, I'm left-handed. One more thing, Hiruzen said. Are you happy, Naruto? Naruto stared at him, those lazy blue eyes half closed like he was permanently on the edge of sleep. Then the corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, something close. Happy takes energy. I'm fine. Fine is good. He stood up, put his hands back in his pockets, and walked out. The door handle froze behind him. Hiruzen sat alone in his office for a long time. His pipe had gone out. He didn't relight it. He was beginning to understand that the village hadn't sealed a monster inside a boy. They'd sealed a boy next to a monster, and the boy had frozen the monster, and now the boy was the scariest thing in the room, and nobody had noticed yet. The academy years were unremarkable in the way that a hurricane is unremarkable to the hurricane. Everyone around Naruto experienced chaos. Naruto experienced Tuesday. He attended class. Mostly. When he was awake, Iruka Umino, the academy instructor, Chunin, scar across his nose, heart bigger than his common sense, took attendance every morning and learned quickly that here from Naruto could mean several things. It could mean Naruto was in his seat. It could mean Naruto's ice clone was in his seat, while the real Naruto slept on the roof. It could mean Naruto was technically in the building, but had frozen himself to the ceiling of the supply closet for reasons he declined to explain. Naruto, Iruka said one morning, for the 100th time, why are you sleeping? Because I'm tired. We're in the middle of a lesson on chakra control. I know, it's very boring. Iruka should have been angry. Any other student and he would have been furious. But there was something about the way Naruto said things, flat, honest, without any malice or disrespect, that made it impossible to stay mad. He wasn't being rude, he was being accurate. The lesson was boring, everyone knew it. Naruto was just the only one honest enough to say it and powerful enough that nobody could make him care. Because here was the thing, Naruto passed every test, every single one, not with effort, not with struggle. He passed them the way a river passes a pebble, by flowing around them without slowing down. The written tests he finished in minutes. His handwriting was sloppy, his answers were short, and every single one was correct. Iruka checked them twice, then 3 times, then showed them to the other instructors. Correct. All of them, every time. How? Iruka asked him once. Naruto shrugged. I read the textbook. When? While I was sleeping, I propped it on my face. This was somehow true. Multiple witnesses confirmed it. The physical tests were worse, or better, depending on perspective. The kunai throwing test, Naruto hit every target dead center without looking. His arm moved lazily, like he was flicking crumbs off a table, and every throw was perfect. The other students stopped throwing to watch. Naruto didn't notice because his eyes were closed. The sparring tests were where it became a spectacle. Every student in the class had to fight Naruto at least once as part of the rotation. Every student in the class lost. Most of them didn't even understand how. Kiba Inuzuka, the loudest boy in the class, charged at Naruto with a spinning attack. Kiba's fist went through Naruto's torso. Literally through it. His arm plunged into a chest that turned to ice and vapor and reformed around his fist. Kiba yanked his arm back. It was blue, frostbitten to the elbow. He screamed. Naruto blinked slowly. Arara, you should get that looked at. Shino Aburame sent his insects toward Naruto during their match. They landed on him. They froze. Tiny insect sequels fell off his body like ornaments from a Christmas tree. Shino adjusted his glasses and said, I forfeit, which was the smartest thing anyone did all semester. Sasuke Uchiha, top of the class, prodigy, last loyal Uchiha, a boy made of ambition and grief, faced Naruto and didn't hold back. He came in fast, textbook perfect taijutsu, striking at angles that would have dropped any other student. Every blow phased through Naruto's body. Every punch hit ice and mist. Sasuke's hands went numb, his ankles cracked with frost. He jumped back, panting, and stared at the boy in front of him who hadn't moved, hadn't even taken his hands out of his pockets. Are you done? Naruto asked. Genuine question. Not mocking. He honestly wanted to know if Sasuke was done so he could go back to his seat. Sasuke's Sharingan almost activated right there from pure rage. He was 10. What are you? Sasuke hissed. Tired. Iruka called the match. Naruto went back to his seat. The seat froze. The desk froze. The floor under the desk froze. The girl sitting next to him, Hinata Hyuga, was turning progressively redder, though it was unclear whether this was because of Naruto's proximity or the cold. It was Naruto's proximity. It was always Naruto's proximity. Hinata Hyuga had the dubious honor of being the only person in the academy who had seen Naruto do something genuinely alarming. She'd stayed late one afternoon to practice her gentle fist forms in the training yard. The sun was setting. She heard a sound, a long, slow exhale, like winter breathing, and turned around. Naruto was standing at the edge of the yard, one hand raised. In front of him, rising from the ground like a living thing, was a bird, an enormous bird made entirely of ice, 20 feet tall. Its wings were spread. Its beak was open. Every feather was individually carved from frozen crystal so cold that the air around it turned to vapor. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing she had ever seen. Naruto held it there for a moment. Then he closed his hand. The bird exploded into snowflakes that drifted across the training yard like confetti. He noticed her watching. Their eyes met. Arara. He scratched the back of his head. Sorry, was practicing. Practicing what? Hinata managed. He thought about it. I'm not sure yet, but it'll probably be loud. He walked away. Hinata stood in the falling snow in July and didn't move for 10 minutes. She told no one. Not because she was protecting him, because she genuinely didn't think anyone would believe her. Graduation day arrived like every other day for Naruto Uzumaki, with a yawn and a slow walk and a sleep mask that needed adjusting. The practical exam was simple. 3 components: a clone jutsu, a transformation jutsu, and a combat demonstration. The passing grade was a combined score of 70 out of 100. Naruto walked into the examination room. Iruka and Mizuki sat behind a desk with clipboards. Iruka smiled at him. Mizuki's smile was different, too wide, too friendly, hiding something underneath. Naruto's observation haki read Mizuki's intent like a billboard. Malice, deception, a plan involving Naruto that would end badly for one of them. Naruto filed this information away. He'd deal with it later, probably. Clone jutsu first, please, Iruka said. Naruto raised one hand. No seals. The air temperature in the room dropped 15 degrees. Beside him, 3 ice clones materialized from the moisture in the air. They were perfect. Not translucent academy-level imitations. Perfect. 3 additional Narutos, solid, detailed down to the sleep mask and the lazy eyes, made of ice so dense it looked like flesh. Iruka's pen stopped moving. He stared. Mizuki's fake smile cracked. One of the ice clones yawned and scratched its stomach. Another one leaned against the wall and closed its eyes. The third sat down on the floor. They were autonomous, independent. Each one carried a fraction of Naruto's power, and a fraction of Naruto's power was more than most chunin had on their best day. These are not standard clones, Iruka said carefully. You said clones. You didn't say standard. Iruka looked at Mizuki. Mizuki looked at his clipboard. His hands were shaking, not from cold. Transformation jutsu, Iruka said. Naruto's form blurred. Where the boy had stood, there was now a perfect replica of the 3rd Hokage. Perfect, down to the liver spots and the pipe and the slight hunch. Then the transformation shifted. Now it was Iruka, scar and all. Then it was Mizuki. And the fake Mizuki's eyes were a little too knowing, a little too aware, and the real Mizuki shifted in his seat. Naruto dropped the transformation. Good enough? Combat demonstration, Iruka said, slightly hoarse. The combat demonstration was supposed to involve hitting a series of targets and performing a basic offensive jutsu. The targets were wooden posts set up in the academy's outdoor training field. There were 12 of them. Arranged in 2 rows, Naruto walked outside. The other graduating students were watching from the sidelines. This was the last exam of the day, and word had spread. Naruto Uzumaki's practical exam. The weird kid who slept through everything. The one nobody could hit. Naruto stopped in the center of the field. He looked at the 12 wooden posts. He looked at the sky. He looked at Iruka. All of them? All of them. Naruto placed his hand flat on the ground. Ice Age. He said it quietly, almost conversationally. The ground turned white. It happened so fast that no one saw the transition. One moment the field was dirt and grass and wooden posts. The next moment it was a frozen wasteland. The ice spread from his palm in every direction, not slowly, not dramatically, but instantly. The dirt froze, the grass froze, the wooden posts froze and shattered from the inside out, the water in their fibers expanding and exploding them into frozen splinters. The fence around the training field froze. The wall of the academy building behind them frosted over. A bird that had been flying overhead dropped 3 feet before correcting, its wings covered in a thin layer of ice. The freezing radius extended 200 meters in every direction. Every student watching was now standing in 3 inches of ice. Their shoes were stuck to the ground. Their breath came out in clouds. Sakura Haruno's teeth were chattering. Shikamaru Nara had been lying on his back watching clouds and was now frozen to the ground, staring at the sky with an expression that said he'd expected this and was annoyed about being right. Sasuke Uchiha was the only one who'd managed to leap clear in time, and he was standing on a fence post with his hands balled into fists and his jaw tight. Iruka stared at the field. There were no more targets. There was no more field. There was a frozen plain stretching to the tree line and a blond boy standing in the middle of it with his hands in his pockets. Arara, Naruto said, looking at the devastation, went a little far. Iruka's clipboard was frozen to his hand. He had to pry it free. The scoring section of his paperwork said, Combat Demonstration, /30. He wrote 30. Then he crossed it out and wrote 30 again, larger, and underlined it. Naruto got the highest score in the history of the Academy practical exam. He was asleep before the applause started, curled up on a patch of ice in the middle of the ruined field like a cat in a sunbeam, except the sunbeam was a frozen hellscape, and the cat was the most dangerous 12-year-old alive. Iruka placed the forehead protector on Naruto's chest while he slept. It frosted over immediately. Naruto's hand closed around it unconsciously. Iruka stood over him for a long moment. He thought about the boy who sat alone at Ichiraku Ramen, eating quietly, never asking for seconds because he didn't want to be a bother. He thought about the boy who let villagers throw things at him and never retaliated, not because he couldn't, but because it would require caring about them, and caring required energy he'd rather spend sleeping. He thought about the boy who was so powerful that the entire world should have been afraid of him, and all he wanted was a quiet place to lie down. Iruka's eyes stung. He blamed the cold. Mizuki made his move that night because Mizuki was an idiot. Here's what happened. Mizuki told Naruto about a secret graduation test. Steal the forbidden scroll from the Hokage's office, learn a jutsu from it, and you'll become an elite ninja. This was obviously a lie. Mizuki wanted the scroll for himself and wanted Naruto to take the fall. Naruto knew this. His observation haki had read Mizuki's intent clearly during the exam. The malice, the deception, the layer of smug confidence over a core of treachery. Naruto stole the scroll anyway, not because he fell for Mizuki's trick, because he was mildly curious about what was inside, and stealing it gave him something to do besides sleep. He sat in the forest clearing, scroll open across his lap, reading jutsu after jutsu with the same energy someone would read a restaurant menu. Shadow clone jutsu, interesting, redundant for him. Reaper death seal, nasty stuff, hard pass. Dead demon consuming seal, who wrote these names? Edo Tensei. He paused on that one. Read it twice, then moved on. Mizuki arrived an hour later, shuriken on his back, grin on his face. The full villain reveal. Naruto, hand over the scroll. Naruto turned a page. Busy. You don't understand, do you? You were never going to pass. You're a demon. The 9 tails that killed everyone, it's sealed inside you. Naruto turned another page. The revelation, the one that was supposed to shatter him, supposed to break his identity, supposed to send him spiraling into an existential crisis, landed like a snowflake on a glacier. I know, Naruto said. Mizuki's grin froze. Not literally. Yet, you know? Giant fox, sealed in my stomach. Very loud. Currently buried in ice because he doesn't know when to stop talking. Naruto finally looked up from the scroll. Kind of like you. Mizuki's hand went to the giant shuriken on his back. His face twisted. You little? Iruka burst from the trees. Naruto, get away from him. Mizuki spun the shuriken free and hurled it. Not at Naruto. At Iruka. Because Mizuki was the kind of person who went for the easy target, the soft target, the one who couldn't turn into ice. The shuriken screamed through the air toward Iruka's chest. Naruto was between them. He hadn't visibly moved. One moment he was sitting with the scroll. The next he was standing in the shuriken's path. The massive blade hit his chest and passed through. Ice scattered. Vapor hissed. The shuriken continued its path and embedded in a tree behind him, and Naruto reformed from nothing like he'd never been touched. Mizuki stared. Iruka stared. Ice time. Naruto's hand was already on Mizuki's face. When had he crossed the distance? Neither of them had seen him move. The ice spread from his palm across Mizuki's skin, down his neck, across his chest, down his arms, down his legs. In 2 seconds, Mizuki was a statue, frozen solid, eyes wide open behind the ice, still showing the exact moment he realized he had made the worst mistake of his miserable life. Naruto let go. The frozen Mizuki stood upright in the clearing, perfectly preserved, mouth open mid-scream. Arara. Naruto looked at Iruka. Is the secret test over? I want to sleep. Iruka's legs gave out. He sat on the ground hard, staring at the frozen traitor and the boy who'd frozen him without breaking a sweat. Naruto, how long have you been able to do that? Naruto thought about it. Always? The Anbu arrived 12 minutes later. They found Iruka sitting against a tree, crying. Naruto asleep on the grass with the forbidden scroll as a pillow. And Mizuki, a perfect ice sculpture that took 3 fire jutsu specialists and 40 minutes to thaw out. When they finally freed him, he was alive, conscious, hypothermic. And his first words were, "Keep that thing away from me." He wasn't talking about the Nine Tails team assignments came a week later. Naruto sat in his seat, frozen as usual, with his head on his desk and his sleep mask down. The announcement of teams was supposed to be a formative moment, the beginning of a ninja career, a step into adulthood. Naruto was drooling on his desk. Team 7, Iruka announced, reading from the sheet. Naruto Uzumaki, Sasuke Uchiha, Sakura Haruno. Your Jonin instructor is Kakashi Hatake. Sakura groaned. Sasuke said nothing. Naruto's ice clone, sitting in his seat, gave a thumbs up. The real Naruto was on the roof, asleep in the sun. They waited in the classroom for their instructor. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours. Sakura paced. Sasuke brooded by the window. Naruto's ice clone dissolved after 2 hours, and the real Naruto wandered in through the door at the 3-hour mark, yawning, having apparently sensed through observation haki that their instructor was finally approaching. He's coming, Naruto said, sitting down. How do you know? Sakura demanded. I know. Kakashi Haki walked through the door 30 seconds later. Silver hair, mask, one visible eye, droopy and bored. He looked at his 3 students. He looked specifically at Naruto. Something flickered behind that one eye. Recognition, maybe, or warning. My first impression of you all. I hate you. Sakura deflated. Sasuke scowled. Naruto yawned. Kakashi's eye lingered on the yawn. Something about this boy was wrong in a way that made every instinct he'd honed in Anbu scream at him. The air around Naruto was 3 degrees colder than the rest of the room. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Enough for a former Anbu captain. Meet me at Training Ground 7 tomorrow morning. 6 a.m. Don't eat breakfast, you'll throw up. He disappeared in a body flicker. Naruto put his head back on the desk. 6 a.m. is inhumane. You slept through the last 3 hours, Sakura yelled. Exactly, I need at least 3 more. Training Ground 7, 6 a.m. A beautiful morning, clear skies, birds singing, 3 posts in the middle of a grass field, a memorial stone off to the side. Sakura was there at 5:45, nervous and fidgeting. Sasuke was there at 5:50, leaning against a post, arms crossed. Naruto arrived at 8:30 on a bicycle. A rusted, creaking, ancient bicycle that left a trail of ice across the ground behind it. He pedaled lazily up to the training ground, dismounted, leaned the bike against a tree, and walked over to the nearest post. He leaned his back against it, crossed his arms, tilted his sleep mask down, and immediately fell asleep, standing up. "You're late!" Sakura screamed. Naruto's sleep mask shifted. One blue eye peeked out. "Kakashi isn't here. That's not the point. It's exactly the point." Kakashi arrived at 9, 3 hours late. He walked up to his team with an eye smile and a wave. "Morning. Sorry I'm late. A black cat crossed my path and..." "Liar," all 3 students said simultaneously. The first and possibly last time they'd agree on anything. Kakashi held up 2 silver bells. "Here's the deal. 2 bells, 3 of you. Whoever gets a bell passes 1. Whoever doesn't goes back to the academy. You have until noon. Come at me with the intent to kill, or you won't have a chance." Sakura's face paled. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. Naruto was asleep. "Begin." Sakura vanished into the trees. Textbook hiding. Find cover, assess the situation, wait for an opening. Smart. Sasuke also disappeared but moved close, circling, looking for an angle of attack. Smarter. Naruto stayed against the post. Asleep. Kakashi stared at him. The boy hadn't moved, hadn't even opened his eyes. He was either supremely arrogant, completely insane, or Kakashi's instincts screamed at him again, operating on a level where this test genuinely didn't concern him. Kakashi decided to test the theory. He moved fast, jonin fast, crossing the distance in a blur, kunai in hand. He drove the blade straight into Naruto's chest. The kunai sank in up to the handle. Naruto's body shattered, not like a clone dispersing, not like a substitution. He broke apart into chunks of ice, solid, actual ice, that scattered across the ground like someone had dropped a tray of ice cubes. The kunai clattered among them, blade frosted over, metal steaming in the sudden cold. Kakashi's hand was numb. He stared at the ice cubes. Each one was perfectly formed. Each one was unbearably cold. One of them was still shaped like a finger. "Arara, you're pretty violent for a teacher." The voice came from behind him. Kakashi spun. Naruto was standing 3 feet away, hands in pockets, completely intact, looking mildly amused in the way a cat looks at a laser pointer. Kakashi's visible eye went wide. He hadn't sensed the boy move. He hadn't sensed anything. One moment there was a pile of ice cubes, and the next Naruto was behind him like he'd always been there. Naruto placed one hand on Kakashi's shoulder. Casual, almost friendly. Ice time. The cold hit like a physical force. Ice erupted from Naruto's palm and raced down Kakashi's body, across his flak jacket, down his legs, encasing everything below his waist in a block of ice so dense it looked like glass. Kakashi tried to substitute out, tried to flicker, tried to move at all. The ice had his legs, his hips, his waist. He was rooted to the ground like a tree wearing a mask and a headband and an expression of profound, existential confusion. Naruto walked past him, reached up, plucked both bells from Kakashi's hip with a gentle tug. They chimed in his hand. From the tree line, Sakura and Sasuke watched. Sakura's mouth was open. Sasuke's fists were clenched so hard his knuckles were white. Naruto tossed one bell to Sasuke. It arced through the air and Sasuke caught it on reflex. He tossed the other to Sakura. She fumbled it, caught it against her chest. Then he walked back to the post, leaned against it, and slid down to sit on the ground. Sleep mask down, arms crossed. "Wake me when it's lunch." Kakashi was still frozen. He had read every bingo book in circulation. He had memorized every S-rank threat, every A-rank threat, every notable bloodline and Kekkei Genkai in the elemental nations. He had survived a war. He had lost a teacher, a friend, a teammate. He had seen things that would break most people. Nothing had prepared him for a 12-year-old who turned into ice, phased through a lethal strike, froze a jonin in place with a touch, and then took a nap. He stood there, frozen from the waist down, staring at the sky, and for the first time in years, he thought about his teacher. Minato-sensei, the yellow flash, the fastest man alive, and he thought, your son is something else entirely. Can someone? Kakashi started, his voice remarkably calm for a man encased in ice. Can someone get me out of this? Sasuke looked at the bell in his hand, then at Naruto, then at Kakashi. How? Fire jutsu, anything hot. Sasuke performed the hand signs for Great Fireball and blasted the ice. It took 4 fireballs. The ice didn't melt easily. It resisted heat in a way that was fundamentally wrong, as if it was offended by the concept of thawing. When Kakashi was finally free, his legs were numb and his teeth were chattering, and the great copy ninja of Konoha looked like he just walked through a blizzard in his underwear. He looked at his 3 students, at the 2 who held bells and the 1 who was asleep. "You all pass," he said, and his voice had something new in it, something that might have been fear, or awe, or the understanding that he had been assigned to a team with a genin who could probably fight him seriously and win. Sakura and Sasuke stared at each other. They stared at Naruto. They stared at the crater of thawed ice where Kakashi had been standing. This was going to be a very different Team 7. The first few missions were D ranks, because all genin teams started with D ranks, because the Hokage had a system and systems existed to be followed. Naruto did them. All of them. Not because he cared about the missions, because finishing them fast meant more nap time. Catch the Fire Daimyo's wife's cat, Tora? Naruto placed his hand on the ground. A thin sheet of ice spread across every surface in a 6-block radius, each one precisely cold enough to make a cat's paws uncomfortable. Tora came running straight to the mission office because it was the only warm floor in town. Mission time, 4 minutes. Weed a farmer's garden? Naruto froze the weeds at the root. They snapped off clean, dead, and brittle. Mission time, 2 minutes. The farmer stared at his perfectly clean field with his mouth open. Paint a fence? Naruto actually painted the fence. Normally, by hand. It took 2 hours. He fell asleep twice and got paint in his hair. "Why didn't you use your ice for that one?" Sakura asked. "Painting is relaxing." Kakashi watched his student with the eye of a man who was writing very long, very detailed reports to the Hokage. The third had pulled him aside after the bell test. "What is he?" Kakashi had asked. "I don't know," Hiruzen admitted, "and I've been Hokage for decades. His power, it's not a Kekkei Genkai, it's not the Nine Tails, it's something else. I'm aware. He froze me, sir. I couldn't break free. The ice was resistant to chakra-enhanced techniques. I've never encountered anything like it." Hiruzen took a long draw on his pipe. "Kakashi, protect him. Train him if he'll let you. And if something threatens him, get out of his way. That last part is not for his safety. It's for yours." Kakashi took this advice seriously. The Land of Waves mission started as a C-rank escort and became an A-rank disaster within the first 3 hours. This was normal. Missions in the Naruto world went wrong with the regularity of a train schedule. The client was Tazuna, a bridge builder, drunk, loud, hiding a secret. Naruto's observation haki read the deception on him before they left the village gates. But Naruto didn't say anything. Whatever Tazuna was hiding would reveal itself. These things always did. Getting worked up about it was a waste of energy. They walked. Kakashi led. Sakura and Sasuke flanked the client. Naruto drifted at the back, hands in pockets, moving at a pace that could charitably be called a saunter. A puddle sat in the middle of the road despite 2 days without rain. Naruto felt the 2 chakra signatures hiding in the puddle before they were within 50 yards of it. Shonen level, hostile intent, chains, poison. He kept walking. The demon brothers erupted from the puddle. Chains whipped out. They wrapped around Kakashi and pulled. Kakashi appeared to be shredded into pieces. Sakura screamed. Sasuke dropped into a combat stance. Tazuna went white. The demon brothers turned toward the client. Chains spinning. Poison gauntlets gleaming. Naruto was between them. He'd covered 30 feet in under a second. No body flicker. No substitution. Just speed. The kind of speed that made the air crack and the ground frost over where his feet touched. He caught one chain in his left hand, caught the other in his right. The chains froze on contact. The ice raced up the metal links like lightning running backwards, up the chains, into the gauntlets, up the arms of the demon brothers. They screamed, tried to release, couldn't. Their fingers were frozen to the handles. Ice time capsule. Both brothers froze simultaneously. Twin blocks of ice, standing upright in the middle of the road. Expressions of shock preserved perfectly behind the crystal clear surface. Naruto let go of the chains. They shattered. Pieces of frozen metal tinkled across the road like dropped silverware. Kakashi reformed from a substitution log behind a tree, perfectly fine, watching. His plan had been to hang back and see how his team handled the threat. He'd been ready to intervene if anyone was in danger. He hadn't needed to move. You knew they were there, Kakashi said. Not a question. Puddle, no rain. Naruto shrugged. Also, I felt them. Felt them? Naruto tapped his temple. Huff, I always feel them. Kakashi filed that under things about Naruto that prevent me from sleeping at night. The list was growing. They continued to the land of waves. The frozen demon brothers were left for Anbu pickup. When the extraction team arrived, they would need fire jutsu specialists and a full hour to thaw the blocks. The brothers would be conscious the entire time. Screaming was difficult when your jaw was frozen shut. The mist came in off the water like a living thing. They were on a boat, crossing the channel to wave country. Tazuna sat in the bow, drinking. Sakura was nervous. Sasuke was alert. Kakashi had his hand near his headband, ready to reveal the Sharingan. The boatmen rowed in terrified silence. Naruto sat on the edge of the boat with his legs dangling over the water. His feet touched the surface. Wherever they touched, ice formed. Small circles of frost that spread and dissolved in the boat's wake, like lily pads made of crystal. The mist isn't natural, Kakashi said quietly. I know, Naruto replied, even quieter. They reached shore. They walked through the forest toward Tazuna's village. The mist thickened. Naruto's observation haki painted a picture in his mind, a large chakra signature ahead, hostile, patient, wielding something big and sharp, and a smaller one nearby, watching, waiting. Duck, Naruto said. Everyone dropped. A massive sword, the Kubikira Bocho, the executioner's blade, whipped over their heads like a helicopter rotor, carving through 3 trees before embedding in a 4th with a sound like a thunderclap. A figure appeared on top of the blade's handle. Tall, bandages over his mouth. No shirt. Arms like a dock worker's. Eyes that had seen and caused more death than most people could imagine. Zabuza Momochi, the demon of the hidden mist. A-rank missing nin, one of the 7 ninja swordsmen. Kakashi of the Sharingan, Zabuza said, his voice a low rumble through the bandages. I've heard of you. Kakashi pulled up his headband. The Sharingan spun in his left eye. Zabuza Momochi, I've heard of you too. Hand over the bridge builder, I'll make it quick. I don't think so. The battle between 2 elite jonin began, and it was exactly the kind of battle 2 elite jonin would have. Fast, vicious. Water clones and substitutions and explosive tags and the hidden mist jutsu thickening the fog until visibility dropped to arm's length. Kakashi was good. Zabuza was good. They traded blows through the mist, each one probing, testing, looking for an opening. Zabuza found his first, the water prison jutsu. His hand shot out and caught Kakashi in a sphere of water, holding him immobile, one hand maintaining the prison while his water clone turned toward the genin and the bridge builder. Run! Kakashi managed through the water. Take Tazuna and run. This is beyond. Beyond what? Naruto asked. He was standing at the edge of the lake. The water around his feet was already turning white. Zabuza's clone looked at the blonde kid. Tall for 12. Sleep mask. Hands in pockets. Eyes like someone watching paint dry. Get out of here, brat. This doesn't concern you. Naruto looked at the lake. The massive, wide, deep lake that Zabuza was using as his water source, his battleground, his advantage, the foundation of every jutsu in his arsenal. His home turf. Naruto exhaled slowly. His breath turned to crystals in the air. Water? Almost to himself. How troublesome. He placed one hand flat on the surface of the lake. Ice Age. The lake froze, not the edge, not a section, not a dramatic spreading wave of ice that characters could run from. The entire lake froze solid in under 3 seconds, shore to shore, surface to floor. Every cubic meter of water became ice in a single, catastrophic instant. The sound was indescribable, a crack boom roar that echoed off the mountains like cannon fire. The ground shook. Trees at the water's edge split as the ice expanded and pushed their roots apart. The mist, Zabuza's beloved precious mist, crystallized. It didn't disperse. It froze in the air and fell as snow. Perfect, gentle, silent snow drifting down onto a landscape that had become winter in the space of a heartbeat. The water prison jutsu, made of water, froze around Kakashi. The water sphere became an ice sphere, and ice was solid, and solid could be broken. Kakashi flexed his chakra, and the frozen prison shattered, freeing him. He dropped to the now frozen lake surface, gasping. The water clone, made of water, froze where it stood. A silent, detailed ice sculpture of Zabuza, one arm raised, mouth open behind the bandages. And Zabuza himself, standing on the lake, drawing his jutsu from the lake, dependent on the lake for everything he did, felt the ice crawl up his legs, up his waist, up his chest. He tried to move, tried to body flicker, tried to use any of the dozens of techniques he'd learned in a lifetime of violence. He couldn't. The ice reached his neck and stopped. His head was free. Everything else was encased in ice, so cold that the air around it turned to vapor. He was embedded in the frozen lake like a man sinking in concrete, only his face above the surface. Zabuza's eyes, the only part of him that could still move, shifted to the boy standing on the ice. The boy hadn't moved from his spot. One hand was still on the surface. The other was still in his pocket. "What the hell are you?" Naruto straightened up. He looked at the frozen lake. The frozen mist falling as snow, the frozen water clone, the frozen Zabuza, his frozen teacher, now free and staring at him from 20 feet away. Arara. He scratched the back of his head, went a little far again. Kakashi stood on the frozen lake and felt the cold through his sandals and thought about the reports he was going to have to write. He thought about the strategic implications. He thought about what would happen when word of this reached other villages. Then he stopped thinking and just watched the snow fall. "Naruto," Kakashi said after a long moment, "what exactly would you have done if I hadn't been captured?" "Probably slept." "And if I had been killed?" Naruto looked at him. For a fraction of a second, so brief that Kakashi almost missed it, there was something in those lazy blue eyes that wasn't lazy at all. Something old and cold and utterly implacable. "Then I would have frozen everything." Kakashi believed him. Haku arrived in a swirl of ice mirrors. Beautiful, lethal. The crystal ice mirrors jutsu, a dome of reflective ice panels, each one a portal, allowing the user to move between them at impossible speeds. Striking from every angle simultaneously, the mirrors materialized around Sasuke, who had charged forward to engage. Senbon needles flew from every direction. Sasuke dodged, fast, Sharingan awakening, seeing the attacks, but not fast enough. Needles struck his arms, his legs. He dropped to one knee. Sakura screamed his name. Haku's voice floated from the mirrors, sad and gentle. "I'm sorry, I don't wish to kill you, but Zabuza needs me." "He's in a glacier," Naruto said. He was standing at the edge of the mirror dome. He'd walked over while Haku was talking. No rush, no urgency. He plucked a blade of grass from the frozen ground, one of the few blades that hadn't been destroyed by the Ice Age, and held it between two fingers. He breathed on it slowly. The moisture from his breath coated the grass blade and froze, layer by layer, until it was a 2-foot sword of ice so sharp it hummed in the air. Ice saber. He stepped into the mirror dome. Haku moved. Fast, genuinely fast. A blur between mirrors, Senbon flying from 6 angles. The needles hit Naruto's body and passed through, shattered on exit. Ice fragments scattered. Haku stopped between mirrors, shocked. Your body." Naruto swung the ice saber. Casual, one-handed. The way someone would swat a fly, the nearest ice mirror shattered, not cracked, not chipped, exploded into powder. The ice of the mirror met the ice of the saber and the mirror lost. It lost because Haku's ice was impressive, genuinely impressive, among the best in this world, but it was thin, fragile, a product of chakra and technique and bloodline. Naruto's ice was not a technique, it was what cold meant. It was the temperature at which molecules stopped moving. It was the end of heat given physical form. "Your ice is pretty, kid." Naruto walked forward, shattering mirrors with each lazy swing. The dome was collapsing around him. "But it's thin. It's got no weight to it." Haku retreated to the last remaining mirror, panting. Senbon spent, desperate. The mask, the Anbu-style mask, hid the tears forming in the eyes behind it. "I fight for Zabuza. He is my purpose. Without him, I am nothing." Naruto stopped. He looked at the masked figure in the mirror, a child, probably his age, maybe a year older, fighting to the death for a man who was currently frozen in a lake, willing to die for a purpose someone else had given them because they couldn't find one of their own. "Ice time." He said it softly, almost gently. The ice spread from his hand in a targeted wave, not the apocalyptic surge of Ice Age, but a precise, controlled freeze that encased Haku in a block of transparent ice. Slowly, carefully. The way you'd put a blanket over a sleeping child. Haku's body suspended, preserved, alive but immobile, every cell frozen in perfect stasis. Naruto looked at the ice block, at the face behind the mask, frozen mid-sentence. Figure out what you actually want before you die for someone else. He said it to the frozen block. Then he turned and walked away. Sasuke was on the ground, bristling with senbon, but alive. His newly awakened Sharingan spun wildly, trying to process what he'd just seen. A 12-year-old boy had walked into a jutsu that had nearly killed him, walked through it, and ended the fight with a sentence and a touch. "What are you?" Sasuke whispered. Same question he'd asked at the academy. Still no answer. "Tired," Naruto said. Same answer. Always the same answer. Sakura ran to Sasuke, healing supplies out, tears streaming. Kakashi arrived a moment later, limping slightly from the cold. He looked at the shattered mirror dome, at the frozen Haku, at Naruto, who was already walking toward the bridge. "The bridge builder," Naruto said without turning around. "Thugs are coming. I can feel them." Kakashi's blood went cold. Not from the temperature. The bridge was chaos. Gato, the shipping magnate, the real villain, the tiny man with the big wallet who'd hired Zabuza in the first place, arrived with 200 mercenaries. He stood behind them, smirking, cane in hand, sunglasses glinting. "Zabuza's been beaten?" He laughed. "Useless. Kill everyone. The bridge builder, the ninjas, the brat with the sword, everyone. 200 men. Swords. Crossbows." The desperation of hired killers who knew they wouldn't get paid if they didn't perform. Tazuna went white. Sakura gripped her kunai. Sasuke, battered and bleeding, pushed himself to his feet. Kakashi raised his headband, Sharingan spinning. Naruto stood at the far end of the bridge. The mist swirled around him. Snow still fell, his snow from the frozen lake, drifting across the bridge like confetti at a funeral. He looked at the 200 mercenaries. He looked at Gato. He yawned. "Arara, this many for a bridge?" He raised his hand. The air temperature dropped so fast that the mercenaries in the front row saw their breath turn solid. Frost raced across the bridge surface. The wooden planks cracked and whitened. Ice time capsule. The ice erupted from the bridge itself. It surged upward in a wave, a wall, a tidal force of frozen destruction that swept across the bridge from Naruto's position to the enemy line. It didn't discriminate. It didn't aim. It just froze everything. Front row, second row, third row. The ice caught them mid-charge, mid-scream, mid-swing. 50 men frozen in an instant. 100, 150. The wave hit the back ranks and Gato turned to run, and the ice caught his shoes and his ankles and his knees and his hips and kept going until the tiny man with the big wallet was a tiny man in a big ice cube, his smug expression preserved perfectly behind the crystal surface. 200 mercenaries, frozen, standing upright on the bridge like a terracotta army made of ice. Every single one alive, every single one immobilized. Their eyes still moved behind the ice. They could see, they could hear. They couldn't do anything else. The bridge was silent. Naruto put his hand down. From behind them, the villagers of Wave Country emerged. They'd gathered, finally, to fight for their own freedom. Pitchforks and fishing spears and the desperate courage of people pushed to the edge. They stood at the entrance to the bridge and stared at what they'd come to fight. 200 frozen statues and a blond boy yawning in the snow. Tazuna dropped his bottle. "What? What are you?" Naruto looked at him, then at the bridge, then at the frozen army, then at the sky. A genin, apparently. They stayed in Wave Country for 2 weeks. The bridge needed finishing. The mercenaries needed thawing, selectively, one by one, disarmed and tied up before being unfrozen. Gato needed to be handed over to whatever passed for law in this part of the world. Zabuza thawed on the 3rd day. It took Kakashi 2 fire jutsu and a very large bonfire. When the ice finally released him, Zabuza's first action was to look at Naruto, who was sitting on the bridge railing fishing. "Kid, that thing you did. What was that?" "Which thing?" "The lake. You froze the entire lake." Naruto reeled in his line. "Empty hook." "Yeah." Zabuza was quiet for a long time. He was a killer. A monster by most definitions, but he was also a ninja who had lived long enough to recognize power when he saw it, and what he had seen, what he had felt from the inside of a glacier, was not power that belonged in a 12-year-old's body. It was not power that belonged in anybody. "How old are you?" "What's your name?" "Naruto Uzumaki." Zabuza filed that name away. He would never forget it. In the years to come, He would tell the story to anyone who would listen. Most wouldn't believe him. He didn't care. He knew what he'd felt. Haku was thawed more gently. Naruto was there when the ice released. The boy, because Haku was a boy, despite appearances, fell to his knees, gasping, and looked up at the blonde figure standing over him. You spared me. You're not a bad person. Bad people are easier. They don't cry behind their masks. Haku's hand went to his face. The mask was gone. It had cracked in the freezing. His tears were real. His confusion was real. What do I do now? Naruto shrugged. Figure it out. You've got time. Haku and Zabuza left Wave Country together. Not as hunter and tool. Something different. Something that might, with enough time and enough distance from the violence they'd known, become something better. Naruto watched them go from the bridge that Tazuna named after him, the Great Naruto Bridge. They named a bridge after me, Naruto said, looking at it. You froze an entire lake and 200 people, Sakura said. I think you earned it. I'd rather have a bench named after me. I could sleep on a bench. They walked home. Kakashi's report to the Hokage was 17 pages long. The third Hokage read it twice, smoked 3 pipes, and added a new entry to the classified section of the village's bingo book. Internal use only, SS classification, eyes only clearance. The entry was short. Naruto Uzumaki, Jinin. Threat level, do not engage. Repeat, do not engage. The Chunin exams came to Konoha like a storm that everyone saw coming and nobody could stop. Jinin from every village, proctors from Konoha's most terrifying divisions. A tournament arc that the entire village and several foreign dignitaries would watch. And behind the scenes, a snake was slithering through the foundations. Team 7 was nominated by Kakashi. Not because they were ready. Sakura wasn't, and Sasuke was a mess of talent and emotional damage, but because Naruto was. Kakashi had run the math. The Chunin exams were dangerous. Hidden Sand was sending teams. There were rumors of something worse moving in the shadows. Kakashi needed Naruto in the exams. Not because Naruto needed the promotion, because the exams needed a deterrent. The written exam was first. Ibiki Morino, head of Konoha's torture and interrogation division, presided. Scarred, terrifying. A man who could break your mind by looking at you. The exam was not about intelligence. It was about information gathering under pressure. The test was impossible to answer without cheating. The real test was whether you could cheat without getting caught, and whether you had the nerve to stay in your seat when the pressure mounted. The room was packed. Jinin from every village sat at numbered desks, sweating. The proctors circled like sharks. Naruto sat in his assigned seat. He looked at the test. 9 questions, each one absurdly difficult. Advanced cryptography, tactical analysis, mathematical proofs. He picked up his pencil, started writing. He finished in 4 minutes. Not because he cheated, not because he used observation hockey to read other people's papers, although he could have. He finished because the test was not, in fact, impossible. It was very difficult for normal people. For a soul that carried the memories of a former admiral who had navigated the politics of the world government, decoded marine intelligence reports, and outmaneuvered pirates with IQs in the stratosphere. The test was a Tuesday morning crossword. He put the paper face down, pushed the pencil to the side, pulled his sleep mask down, and went to sleep on the desk. In the middle of the Chunin exam, Ibiki, making his rounds, stopped at Naruto's desk. He looked at the boy, asleep. 4 minutes into a test that was designed to break people, he carefully turned the paper over, read the answers. His scarred face twitched. Once, every answer was correct. Not just correct, elegant. The tactical analysis question had a solution that Ibiki himself hadn't considered. It was better than the answer key. Ibiki put the paper back face down. He looked at the sleeping boy. He walked away. The 10th question came. Ibiki's psychological gambit. Stay and risk failing forever, or leave and try again later. Teams dropped out. The pressure built. Naruto slept through the entire thing. His sleep mask didn't move. His breathing didn't change. Ibiki delivered his most terrifying speech, the one about permanent failure, about never being a ninja again, about the weight of choosing wrong, and Naruto snored quietly. The blonde one, Ibiki whispered to a proctor. Is he actually asleep? Has been since minute 4, sir. He answered every question correctly. In 4 minutes, sir. Ibiki looked at the sleeping boy for a long time. Then he smiled. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who recognized a kindred spirit, not in cruelty, not in interrogation, but in the simple, devastating confidence of someone who was so far beyond their current situation that they could not be bothered to pretend otherwise. He'll go far, Ibiki said, or destroy everything, possibly both. The Forest of Death. Stage 2. Anko Midarashi, special jonin, proctor, student of a snake, and proud of nothing about that fact, explained the rules. Get 2 scrolls. Survive 5 days. Don't die. The forest was massive, ancient, and filled with things that ate genin for breakfast. Team 7 entered through Gate 7. They had a heaven scroll. They needed an earth scroll. The forest closed around them like a mouth. On the first day, they encountered a rain team. Naruto's observation haki felt them coming from 300 meters out. He told Sasuke and Sakura their positions, their weapons, their intent. Sasuke and Sakura handled it. Naruto leaned against a tree and watched. They got the earth scroll in under an hour. Should we head for the tower? Sakura asked. Let's wait, Naruto said. For what? Something's coming. The killing intent hit the forest like a wall. A physical, crushing, suffocating wave of malice that pressed down on every living thing within a mile radius. Birds dropped from the trees. Insects died where they crawled. 3 genin teams within the blast radius collapsed unconscious, their minds simply shutting down rather than processing what they were feeling. Sakura's legs buckled. She hit the ground on her knees, gasping, tears streaming, unable to move. Her body was locked. The primal animal response to a predator so far above you on the food chain that resistance was biologically impossible. Sasuke was only slightly better. He stayed on his feet through sheer willpower and a lifetime of grief-fueled stubbornness, but his hands were shaking. His Sharingan activated involuntarily, and what it showed him, the shape of the chakra approaching through the trees, made his stomach drop. Naruto tilted his sleep mask up with one finger and looked in the direction of the killing intent. He blinked. Once, in his previous life, he had stood in the presence of Whitebeard, the strongest man in the world, a walking earthquake, a living cataclysm, whose conqueror's haki could knock out 100,000 men. He had faced the full, unrestrained killing intent of Akainu, a man made of magma and absolute conviction. He had met Shanks. He had met Kaido. He had stood on battlefields where the sky split and the sea boiled, and the world itself seemed ready to crack. This killing intent, powerful, yes, well beyond what a 12-year-old should face, was a cold breeze. Naruto didn't shudder. His breathing didn't change. His lazy eyes didn't widen. He simply felt it, measured it against the horrors he carried in his inherited memories, and found it wanting. Get behind me, he said. The figure emerged from the trees. A woman, or what appeared to be a woman, tall, grass village headband. But the face was wrong. The chakra was wrong. Everything about this person screamed predator. The face melted, peeled away, revealed a pale, blocked, snake-like visage with golden eyes and a smile that belonged on something that ate children. Orochimaru of the Sannin, S-rank missing nin, one of the 3 legendary ninja of Konoha, a man who had betrayed his village, experimented on hundreds, murdered more, and was standing in the forest of death with an agenda and a body that held more forbidden jutsu than most libraries. The 9 Tails Jinchuriki, Orochimaru said, his voice a silky rasp. How interesting. But you're not why I'm here. His golden eyes slid to Sasuke. I'm here for the Uchiha. Naruto didn't move, didn't react, didn't respond to the dismissal. Orochimaru's neck elongated, stretched, his head shot forward on a serpentine neck, jaw unhinging, fangs extending, aimed at Sasuke's throat. The cursed seal, the mark, the brand that would begin turning Sasuke into Orochimaru's next vessel. The fangs hit something, not flesh, not a substitution, not a defense jutsu, Naruto's neck. He had stepped into the path, casually, like stepping in front of a door. Orochimaru's fangs, designed to pierce skin, inject cursed chakra, mark the target forever, bit down on Naruto's neck and shattered. Both of them, both fangs. They cracked against his skin like glass on diamond. Because under the surface, in the fraction of a second before contact, Naruto had activated armament haki. His skin had hardened to something beyond steel, beyond diamond, beyond any physical material in the elemental nations. And layered on top of that, absolute zero ice. The combination created a surface so hard and so cold that it destroyed anything that touched it. Orochimaru reeled back. His mouth was bleeding. 2 broken fangs hung from his gums like shattered icicles. His golden eyes that had seen decades of horror and caused most of it, went wide. He stared at the boy who had just tanked his attack without flinching. The boy who was looking at him with those lazy, half-closed eyes. The boy who hadn't taken his hands out of his pockets. Arara. Naruto said slowly, "That was unpleasant." "What?" Orochimaru started. Ice block, pheasant beak. No warning, no wind up, no dramatic pause. One moment Naruto's hand was in his pocket, the next it was extended, palm out, and from his arm erupted a bird. An ice bird, not a small bird. A bird the size of a house. A raptor made of crystallized absolute zero, wings spread, beak open, screaming with the sound of cracking glaciers as it launched from Naruto's palm like a cruise missile. It hit Orochimaru in the chest. The explosion froze half the forest. Trees, ancient trees, 100-foot trees, trees that had survived since the founding of Konoha, frosted over and shattered. The ground became ice. The air became snow. A shockwave of cold radiated from the impact point in every direction, and for a quarter mile in every direction, the forest of death became the forest of absolute zero. The pheasant beak didn't just hit Orochimaru, it detonated against him like a warhead. The ice erupted on contact, spreading across his body, across the ground, across the canopy. A crater formed, not from force, but from cold. The earth froze so deeply that it contracted and cracked. When the snow settled, Orochimaru was, or had been, standing where the bird struck. His body was frozen, encased. A statue of a seinen caught mid-shock, golden eyes wide, mouth open around broken fangs. Then the statue cracked, split down the middle. And from inside, like the world's most disturbing egg, Orochimaru shed his skin. A new body, fresh, uninjured, but paler than before, slithered free of the frozen shell and landed on a branch 30 meters away. He was breathing hard. Steam rose from his new body. His golden eyes locked on Naruto. For the first time in decades, Orochimaru something he hadn't felt since he'd faced Hanzo the Salamander. Since he'd stood before the third Hokage in the prime of his power. Since the world had last shown him something beyond his understanding. Fear. Not panic. Not terror. Something quieter. Something that lived in the back of the brain and whispered, "You are not the predator here." "What are you?" Orochimaru whispered. "I keep getting asked that." Naruto lowered his hand. "The answer doesn't change." Orochimaru ran. The greatest scientific mind of a generation. The man who had infiltrated the Chunin exams to claim Sasuke Uchiha. The snake who feared nothing. He retreated. Sank into the tree branch. Disappeared. Fled from a 12-year-old boy standing in a frozen forest with his hands in his pockets and snowflakes in his hair. He would tell Kabuto later. In the hideout. In the dark where secrets lived. "The Jinchuriki," Orochimaru said. "He is not what we expected." "Shall I gather more intelligence?" Kabuto asked. Orochimaru touched his mouth. The new fangs had already grown in, but the memory of the old ones shattering was fresh. "No, we do not engage him again. Not now. Not until I understand what he is." "And the Uchiha?" Orochimaru's golden eyes narrowed. "The plan adapts. It always does." The whispers started that night. Genin, who had been in the forest, who had felt the cold, who had seen the frozen trees, who had stumbled upon the quarter-mile crater of ice in the middle of a forest that was supposed to be hot and humid, they talked. Ice Demon of Konoha. That's what they called him. At first as a rumor, then as a warning, then as a fact that no one could dispute because the evidence was frozen into the landscape. The preliminary rounds, one-on-one fights, a tower, a balcony full of Genin watching. The fights before Naruto's went as they went. Sasuke won his fight, barely. The curse seal hadn't been applied, but his desire to prove himself drove him harder. Sakura fought valiantly but lost. Other Genin clashed. The system ground on. Then the board lit up. Naruto Uzumaki Vs. Kiba Inuzuka. Kiba grinned, cracked his knuckles. Akamaru barked at his side. "Finally! I've been waiting for a rematch since the academy. You think you can just phase through everything and..." Naruto walked down from the balcony. He stopped in the center of the arena floor. He didn't take a stance, didn't get ready, just stood there. Hayate, the sickly proctor, coughed. "Begin." "Fang over Fang." Kiba and Akamaru spun into twin drilling cyclones, barreling toward Naruto at full speed. Naruto raised one finger. Ice pillar. A column of ice erupted from the floor directly in front of the spinning duo, 30 feet tall, 5 feet wide. Solid as a mountain, Kiba and Akamaru hit it at full speed. The sound was like a car crash. The pillar didn't crack. Kiba and Akamaru bounced off it, spiraling across the arena floor, dazed. The rotational momentum of their technique turned against them by the sudden, immovable object. Kiba staggered to his feet. His nose was bleeding. What the? Ice time. Naruto was already touching Kiba's jacket. When had he moved? Kiba hadn't seen it. The audience hadn't seen it. The ice spread from Naruto's palm across Kiba's body in 1 second flat. Frozen. Done. Akamaru whimpered and pawed at the ice block that was now his partner. Naruto looked at Akamaru. The dog looked at him. Naruto bent down and scratched behind Akamaru's ears. Good boy. Akamaru's tail wagged. Even the dog couldn't stay hostile around Naruto's calm. Hayate coughed. Winner. Naruto Uzumaki. The balcony was silent. Then the whispers started. Ice Demon. There it was again. Kurenai, Kiba's Jonin instructor, gripped the railing. Might Guy leaned forward, eyes wide. Asuma's cigarette fell from his lips. Kakashi, leaning against the wall with his book, turned a page. He'd expected this. The finals were a month away. Training period. Everyone prepared. Naruto slept, mostly. Kakashi found him once during the training month, lying on a park bench downtown with his sleep mask on, bicycle parked against a nearby lamppost. Aren't you going to train? For what? The finals. You're fighting Neji Hyuga, the fate guy. That's reductive, but yes. Is he made of ice? No. Does he have hockey? I don't know what that is. Then I don't need to train. Naruto adjusted his sleep mask. I need to sleep. Sleep is training. The body recovers. The mind settles. Admiral Garp used to say that a nap before a battle was worth more than an hour of push-ups. Who is Admiral Garp? Good question. Naruto was already asleep. Kakashi stood there for a while. Then he walked away. He'd used the month to train Sasuke instead. Sasuke needed it. Naruto needed nothing. Finals day. The stadium was packed. Every seat filled. The feudal lord sat in the VIP boxes. The Hokage sat in his seat of honor. The village's jonin lined the upper levels. Every eye in Konoha, and several from outside it, was focused on the arena floor. Neji Hyuga stood on one side. The Hyuga prodigy, gentle fist master. A boy who had been told since birth that fate was fixed, that destiny was written, that the branch family served and the main family ruled, and there was nothing that would ever change that. He stood with his arms at his sides, Byakugan already active, veins bulging around his eyes. He was focused, determined, ready to prove that fate was absolute. Naruto walked in from the other entrance. Slow, hands in pockets, sleep mask pushed up. He stopped in the center of the arena and looked up at the sky. Nice day, clear, a few clouds. The match between Naruto Uzumaki and Neji Hyuga will now begin. Genma, the proctor, announced. Are both fighters ready? Ready, Neji said, dropping into his gentle fist stance. Naruto looked at Neji, looked at Genma. Sure, begin. Neji didn't attack immediately. He was a strategist. He studied his opponent, looking for the tenketsu, the chakra points, that he would systematically close to shut down Naruto's abilities. I've heard about you, Neji said. The ice user. They say you can't be hit. They say you're untouchable. His Bakugan focused. Your chakra network is unusual, but chakra is chakra, and gentle fist can shut down any chakra system. Naruto tilted his head. Okay, fate has already decided this battle. You were born with talent, I'll grant you that. But talent without the discipline of bloodline, without the weight of generations, Arara, are you going to talk the whole time? Neji's eye twitched. Because I've heard this speech, Naruto continued, yawning. Different versions, same idea. The world is fixed, nothing changes, except your place. He scratched the back of his head. A man I knew, not from here. He said something about that once. He said, the sea doesn't care about walls, it goes where it wants. This isn't about, I'm gonna take a nap now. Wake me when you're done. Naruto sat down in the middle of the arena, cross-legged, and closed his eyes. The stadium exploded with murmurs. The Hokage leaned forward. Kakashi's book snapped shut. Might Guy jumped to his feet. What is this? The flames of youth burned so brightly that he fell asleep, Kakashi said flatly. Incredible. Neji's face went red. Rage. Pure, incandescent rage. The ultimate disrespect. Not a counter, not a defense. The boy had sat down and gone to sleep. You mock me? Neji surged forward. Full speed. 8 trigrams, 64 palms. His hands blurred. Strikes rained down on Naruto's body with precision and speed that would have crippled any other genin. 2 palms. 4 palms, 8 palms, 16 palms, 32, 64. Each strike hit ice, every single one. His fingers drove into Naruto's body and met solid ice. Cold so intense that the chakra in his fingertips sputtered and died. His hands went numb, not gradually, instantly. The cold raced through his fingers, his palms, his wrists. Frostbite in real time. Neji jumped back. His hands were blue. His fingers wouldn't close. The gentle fist, the pride of the Hyuga clan, the technique that could shut down any chakra system with a touch, had struck absolute zero and broken. Naruto opened one eye. "You done?" Neji screamed and charged again. 8 trigrams, rotation, the absolute defense, a spinning dome of expelled chakra. He didn't spin toward Naruto as an attack. He used it to try and regain feeling in his hands, the spinning chakra generating friction and warmth. It wasn't enough. His hands were done. The frostbite had set in. But Neji was a prodigy, and prodigies don't stop. He shifted to kicks, low sweep, aimed at the seated Naruto. His foot passed through Naruto's torso, through the ice body, the Logia defense, and came out the other side coated in frost. Neji stumbled off balance, one frozen foot dragging. Naruto stood up, slowly, like getting out of bed. He reached out and grabbed both of Neji's wrists, gently. Ice time. The ice spread from his hands, down Neji's arms, across his chest, down his torso, down his legs. It stopped at his neck. His head was free. Everything else was encased. Neji stood there, a frozen statue from the neck down, Byakugan still active, staring at the boy who held his wrists with the grip of winter itself. "Fate sounds exhausting," Naruto said. "You should nap more." He let go, walked away, sat back down in the same spot, and pulled his sleep mask down. The stadium was silent. Absolutely. Completely. Devastatingly silent. In the stands, Hiyashi Hyuga, head of the Hyuga clan, Neji's uncle, the man who had watched the branch family serve the main family for his entire life and called it correct, sat with his hands on his knees and stared at the frozen form of his nephew. His expression didn't change, but his hands were shaking. Rock Lee, bandaged and crutched from his own injuries, stood in the audience with tears streaming down his face. "Guy-sensei, that boy." "I see it, Lee." Guy's voice was quiet. None of the usual booming, none of the youthful fire. He was watching something that transcended what he understood about hard work and talent in the human body. "I see it." Hinata Hyuga, sitting in the stands, had her hands pressed to her mouth. Tears in her eyes. Not from sadness, from something she couldn't name. Relief? Validation? The sight of the boy she'd watched shatter mirrors of ice in a training yard, now shattering something much more important. The cage her family had built around itself. And doing it without even trying, Genma, the proctor, had a senbon in his mouth. It was frozen. He spat it out. "Winner, Naruto Uzumaki." The silence broke. Not into cheers, not yet. Into noise. Confused, awed, frightened noise. The sound of thousands of people trying to process what they had just witnessed and failing completely. In the Kage box, the third Hokage sat back in his chair. Beside him, the Kazekage, the fourth Kazekage, or the thing wearing his face, sat very, very still. Behind the mask of the Kazekage, Orochimaru's golden eyes were locked on the arena floor, on the boy sitting cross-legged in the dirt, asleep, while his opponent stood frozen behind him. The plan, the invasion. Sound and sand, coordinated assault, the barrier jutsu on the roof, the summoning of the giant snakes. All of it had been built around a set of assumptions about Konoha's strength. None of those assumptions had included this. The invasion came anyway. Because snakes don't change their nature, and Orochimaru had committed too much to pull back now. Feathers fell. The genjutsu swept the stadium. Civilians slumped in their seats, asleep. Ninja released it, stood, drew weapons. Sound and sand forces poured over the walls. Explosions rocked the village. The barrier went up on the rooftop. Orochimaru versus the third Hokage, a battle of student and teacher inside a box of purple flame. Gaara transformed. The one-tailed Shukaku, a massive tanuki of sand and malice, began to form on the outskirts of the village. Sand ninja attacked. Sound ninja attacked. Konoha defended. Naruto woke up, not because someone woke him. Not because of the explosions or the screams or the killing intent. He woke up because the temperature had changed. Specifically, it was too warm. The explosions, the fire jutsu, the friction of 1,000 battles heating the air of Konoha above what his passive presence had been cooling it to. He sat up, looked around, feathers falling, people fighting, buildings on fire. a giant sand raccoon forming in the distance. Arara, he rubbed his eyes. What a pain. He stood up, stretched, cracked his neck, and walked out of the arena. The sound ninja who tried to stop him froze mid-attack. He didn't even glance at them. His passive cold, his Loja body's ambient temperature drop, was enough. They got within 5 feet of him, and their muscles locked, their lungs seized, their weapons frosted over and cracked. He walked through the battle like it was a field of statues. Every ninja he passed, ally or enemy, felt it. The cold. The impossible, deep, ancient cold that had nothing to do with weather and everything to do with the fundamental nature of the boy walking through the war zone. He found Gaara on the outskirts. The sand Jinchuriki was halfway into his transformation, Shukaku's body forming around him, massive, towering over the treetops. Sand flew in every direction. The ground trembled. Gaara's eyes were wild, desperate. The loneliness of a boy who had been told he was a monster and believed it, who used sand as a shield because he'd never had a person to protect him, who killed because killing was the only language the world had ever spoken to him. Naruto looked up at the half-formed tailed beast, looked at the boy at its center, screaming at the world. He understood, not because they were the same. Naruto had never screamed. Screaming took energy, but he understood the loneliness, the labels, the hatred, the fundamental unfairness of being punished for something sealed inside you. Oi, Naruto called up. Sand Kid. I'll prove my existence. I'll kill you. Mother wants your blood. Your mother isn't talking. That's a tanuki lie. Naruto put his hand on the ground. Ice Age. The ground froze. The air froze. The sand, Gaara's sand, Shukaku's sand, the very substance of the One-Tail's body, froze. Sand is just tiny rocks. Tiny rocks with moisture between them. Moisture that froze instantly at absolute zero, binding every grain together into a solid, immovable mass. The sand armor locked. The sand shield locked. The sand body of the half-formed Shukaku locked. 100-foot monument to a tailed beast, frozen in place, grains of sand welded together by ice so cold they would need volcanic heat to separate. Gaara's scream cut off. He was at the center, buried in his own frozen sand, unable to move. The transformation halted. Naruto walked up the frozen sand body like walking up a hill. He climbed until he reached the center, where Gaara's face was visible. Just his face, the rest encased, eyes wild with fury and terror, and something underneath both of those things that might have been hope. Let me go, Gaara hissed. I'll kill you. You won't kill anyone. Naruto sat down on the frozen sand next to Gaara's head, cross-legged, hands on his knees. You'll sit here, and you'll be quiet. And when this is over, you'll go home and think about whether you want to be a monster or a person. I am a monster. No, you're a kid with a bad tenant. Trust me, I've got a fox who won't shut up. You learn to deal. Gaara stared at him. The wild eyes softened. Not completely. Not suddenly. But the edge of mania dulled, and behind it was a 13-year-old boy who was exhausted and confused and had never, not once in his entire life, been spoken to with this quiet, unbothered calm. Gaara whispered, How can you be so tired? Naruto yawned. Practice. He sat there on the frozen One-Tail while the invasion crumbled below them. Sound retreated. Sand surrendered. Konoha held. The barrier on the rooftop fell, and what was inside it was the end of an era. The third Hokage, who had given his life to seal Orochimaru's arms, who had died protecting his village one final time. Naruto felt it. Through observation haki, he felt the third chakra flicker and go out like a candle in the wind. He sat on the frozen tanuki and looked at the rooftop where it happened and said nothing. His eyes were open, fully open for once. No lazy droop, no half-lidded indifference, just open. And tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. The old man was gone. The old man who had paid his rent and asked if he was happy and looked at him without hatred. Gone. Naruto sat there for a long time. The sun set. The snow, his snow, the ambient result of his grief pressing outward, fell across the village. It was gentle, quiet, a blanket of white over a wounded village. Konoha's first snowfall in July. The funeral was 3 days later. Black clothes, black umbrellas, rain. Naruto stood at the back. He didn't cry. Crying required energy, but his hands, usually in his pockets, hung at his sides. And the temperature around him, already cold, always cold, was colder. The rain that fell near him turned to snowflakes before it reached his shoulders. He stood next to Konohamaru, the third's grandson. The kid was sobbing. Naruto put a hand on his head, said nothing. The hand was cold, but somehow Maru felt warmer. After the funeral, Naruto rode his bicycle to the Hokage monument, sat on the third stone head, looked at the village below. "You asked if I was happy," he said to the stone. "I said fine. Fine is good." He was quiet for a while. "I lied. Fine isn't good. Fine is just fine." He pulled his sleep mask down, leaned back against the carved stone hair. "I'll keep an eye on things. Go rest, old man. Rest is important." Snow fell on the monument, quiet, gentle, cold. The months between the invasion and Sasuke's defection were complicated. Tsunade became the fifth Hokage. She was not impressed by much. She was impressed by Naruto. Not because he tried to impress her, he didn't, but because she was a medical ninja, arguably the greatest who ever lived, and when she examined him, she found something that made no clinical sense. "Your cellular structure," she said, staring at the readout, "is ice." "Yes. I mean literally. Your cells, at the molecular level, are crystalline. They function as biological tissue, but they are structurally ice. How are you alive?" Stubbornness. "That's not a medical answer." "I don't have a medical answer. I have a nap scheduled in 20 minutes. Tsunade stared at him. Then she laughed. A real laugh, the kind she hadn't produced in years. "You're absolutely ridiculous." "So I've been told." She cleared him. There was nothing to treat. "You can't treat what someone is." Jiraiya showed up. The Toad Sage. One of the Sannin, Naruto's godfather, though neither of them mentioned that immediately. Jiraiya wanted to train him. Jiraiya wanted to teach him the Rasengan. Jiraiya wanted to unlock the Nine Tails' power. Naruto listened to the pitch. It was a good pitch. Jiraiya was charming and enthusiastic and genuinely wanted to help. "The fox is frozen," Naruto said. "Frozen?" "In ice, in my mindscape. Has been for years." Just phased through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, horror, amusement, more confusion. "You froze the Nine Tails." It was loud. "The Nine Tails, the strongest tailed beast, the thing that destroyed half the village." Loud. Jiraiya sat down heavily. "Can I see?" Naruto shrugged. He pulled Jiraiya into the mindscape, or rather, he allowed the connection through the seal. Jiraiya appeared in the ice cavern that had once been a sewer and immediately started shivering. The Nine Tails was there, buried in ice. All nine tails frozen in a fan behind it. Its massive eyes, each one the size of a house, tracked Jiraiya's arrival with the burning, desperate fury of a god reduced to a decoration. "You!" Kurama roared, the sound muffled by ice but still earth-shaking. "Jiraiya! Free me from this! Your student Spawn has imprisoned me in this frozen hell for years! Years! I cannot feel my tails!" "You have 9 of them," Naruto said from his lawn chair. "You'll manage." "I will devour you." "You've been saying that? Progress report?" "When I get free, you won't." Jiraiya looked at the frozen-tailed beast, looked at the boy in the lawn chair, looked at the ice cavern. His lips moved soundlessly. Then he started laughing. Deep, belly-shaking laughter that echoed off the frozen walls and made Kurama even angrier, which made Jiraiya laugh harder, which created a feedback loop of hilarity and rage that perfectly summarized everything about this situation. "Your father," Jiraiya managed between gasps, "would have loved this." Naruto's eyes sharpened, just for a second. "My father?" Jiraiya caught himself. But the damage was done. The information was out. And Naruto's observation Haki, always running, always reading, felt the spike of guilt and recognition and love and grief that radiated from the old man like heat from a bonfire. "My father was the 4th Hokage," Naruto said. Not a question, a statement. He'd suspected. The resemblance was obvious. The fact that the 4th had sealed the fox in his own son. It was the kind of sacrifice that made sense only if you were both incredibly brave and incredibly desperate. "Naruto, it's fine." Naruto pulled the sleep mask down. He did what he had to. "I get it. Rest is important." Jiraiya stared at him. At this boy, who had just learned his father was the legendary 4th Hokage, and processed it with the emotional intensity of someone learning the weather forecast. But Jiraiya was old and wise and had seen enough grief to recognize it even when it wore a mask of indifference. He saw the tiny, almost invisible tightening around Naruto's eyes, the way his jaw set for just a fraction of a second, the way the temperature in the mindscape dropped 3 degrees. Naruto felt it. He felt all of it. He just didn't have the energy to perform grief for an audience. Lazy justice. Handle what needs handling. Set down what doesn't. Move on. Jiraiya taught him the Rasengan anyway. It took Naruto 2 hours. Not because he struggled. Because he didn't see the point of a spinning ball of chakra when he could freeze a battlefield solid. He learned it because Jiraiya asked him to. And Jiraiya was one of the few people whose asking carried weight. Then Naruto added his own twist. Ice Rasengan. An absolute zero sphere of rotating ice and chakra that didn't just damage what it hit, it froze it at the molecular level, stopping all atomic motion in a concentrated point. Jiraiya watched the demonstration. The training post Naruto hit didn't shatter. It crystallized. Every molecule frozen in place turned from wood to a perfect ice sculpture of a training post, so cold that the air around it turned to snow for 10 minutes. Well, Jiraiya said faintly, that'll do. Then Sasuke left. It happened at night, because defection always happens at night. 4 Sound Ninja, Orochimaru's personal guard, the Sound 4, came for the last Uchiha, and Sasuke went willingly, not captured, not coerced. He walked out of the village on his own 2 feet because a snake had promised him power, and power was the only thing Sasuke could think about when his dead family visited him in his dreams. Sakura tried to stop him. At the village gates, in the dark, crying, begging. The scene was the same, her voice breaking, her heart breaking, everything she felt pouring out in the most vulnerable, desperate moment of her young life. Sasuke looked at her. He said, "Thank you." And he knocked her out, left her on a bench, kept walking. Naruto felt it all. From his apartment across the village, lying in bed, sleep mask on, observation haki painted the picture. Sasuke's chakra moving toward the gate. Sakura's chakra flaring with emotion, then dropping to unconsciousness. The 4 foreign signatures surrounding Sasuke guiding him away. Naruto didn't get up immediately. He lay there for a moment, in the dark, in the cold that always surrounded him. And he thought about Sasuke. Sasuke who was angry and broken and talented and doomed. Sasuke who sat next to him in the academy and pretended not to be curious. Sasuke who ate tomatoes and trained until his hands bled and carried the weight of a dead clan like a boulder chained to his spine. Sasuke who Naruto understood, not because they were similar, but because Naruto understood everyone. Observation haki didn't just read location and intent, it read the shape of a person's spirit. And Sasuke's spirit was a fire burning itself out. Naruto got up, put on his jacket, pushed his sleep mask up, walked to the door. Then he stopped, turned around, looked at his apartment, the frozen countertops, the frosted windows, the bed with the ice crystal blanket, the bicycle in the corner. He walked out. The pursuit team was assembled quickly. Shikamaru led it, because Shikamaru was the only Genin in the Hokage trusted with tactical command, and because Shikamaru's brain operated at a frequency where even this chaos became a puzzle with a solution. The team was Shikamaru, Choji, Kiba, and Akamaru, Neji, and Naruto. 5 Genin and a dog against the Sound 4, Orochimaru's personal elite. They moved fast, through the forests, through the night. The Sound 4 had a head start but were slowed by the casket-carrying Sasuke, who was undergoing the transformation. Orochimaru's cursed seal demanded a cocoon state, painful, altering, turning Sasuke into something stronger and less himself. The battles happened in sequence. The Sound 4 peeled off one by one to delay pursuit, each one engaging a member of the retrieval team while the others pressed forward. Jirobo, the big one, the Earth-style user, peeled off and faced Choji. Choji expanded and fought with everything he had, the Akimichi clan's techniques pushing him to his limit. The battle was hard. Choji won. Barely. He collapsed afterward, spent. Kidomaru, the spider, the long-range fighter, peeled off and faced Neji. 6 arms, webs, arrows of spider silk that could pierce steel. Neji used everything, rotation, 64 palms, the full Hyuga arsenal. He won. He collapsed. His hands still hadn't fully recovered from the frostbite Naruto had given him weeks ago, but he fought anyway, because that was who Neji was now. Not a slave to fate. A boy who chose. Sakon and Ukon, the twins who shared a body, peeled off and faced Kiba and Akamaru. A brutal fight. The twins merged with Kiba's body, tried to destroy him from the inside. Kiba and Akamaru fought with feral desperation. Kankuro arrived, Sand Village, repaying their debt, and helped finish the fight. Tayuya, the Genjutsu flute player, peeled off and faced Shikamaru. shadow techniques against sound-based illusions, a chess match between two tactical minds. Tamari arrived, another sand debt repaid, and ended it with a wind sight. One by one, the Sound Four fell. One by one, the retrieval team was whittled down. Each fight cost everything the Konoha Jinin had. Each victory was barely won. Naruto didn't fight any of them. He walked past each battle. Not because he didn't care. He felt his comrades fighting, felt their pain and determination through observation haki, but because he knew where he needed to be. Every moment spent on the Sound Four was a moment Sasuke got farther away. And Naruto's goal wasn't the guards. It was the prince they were guarding. He moved through the forest like cold wind. The trees frosted as he passed. The ground crackled with ice under his feet. Animals fled. Insects died. The forest recognized the approach of something primal and ancient and cold, and it recoiled. The Valley of the End. Two statues, Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha, standing on either side of a waterfall, the eternal monument to the first great rivalry. The water cascaded between them, roaring, eternal. The place where two friends had fought and one had died and the world had changed. Sasuke stood on Madara's head. The casket was open. The transformation was complete. He wore the same clothes, but his body had changed. The cursed seal's power flowing through him. His skin darker, his eyes carrying the Sharingan's 3 Tomoe in each eye. He looked older, harder, wrong, in a way that had nothing to do with appearance and everything to do with what he was becoming. Naruto arrived on Hashirama's head. He stopped at the edge and looked across the gap at the boy who used to sit next to him. Arara, Sasuke. The voice carried across the valley, quiet and clear. You look terrible. Sasuke's jaw tightened. Go home, Naruto. Can't. I'm not going back. You are. You don't understand. You can't. This power, Orochimaru, can give me what I need. The strength to kill Itachi. The strength to do what? Die angrier than you lived? Naruto put his hands in his pockets. That's not strength. That's a tantrum. Sasuke's chakra flared. The cursed seal pulsed on his neck, black marks spreading across his skin. What would you know about it? You who never struggled for anything? You who sleep through everything? You have no idea what it's like to... I know what it's like to be alone. Naruto's voice was still quiet, still slow, but the air was changing. I know what it's like to have the whole world look at you and see something you're not. I know what it's like to carry something inside you that you never asked for. He paused. I also know what it's like to freeze a fox the size of a mountain because it wouldn't stop screaming about vengeance and hatred and destruction. Sound familiar? Sasuke's eyes widened. You're not going to Orochimaru, Naruto said. You're not going to throw yourself into the dark because you think the dark has what you need. I won't let you. You won't let me? No. Simple. Absolute. The temperature dropped, not gradually, not as a slow decline. The Valley of the End, a lush, warm, waterfall-drenched landscape, plunged into winter in 3 seconds. Snow began to fall. Not from clouds, there were no clouds. The moisture in the air itself froze and descended. The waterfall slowed. The spray crystallized. The rocks on both sides of the valley turned white. Sasuke felt the cold hit him like a punch. The cursed seal burned hotter in response, fighting the chill, but the chill was winning. His breath came out in clouds. Frost formed on his eyelashes. Sakura cried. Naruto said, I don't handle crying well. It's exhausting. He took a step forward. So I'm bringing you back. Sasuke screamed. Not words, pure, raw, broken sound. The sound of a boy who'd been carrying too much for too long and had finally decided that the only direction left was down. The cursed seal erupted, level 2. Wings burst from his back. Hands shaped grotesque, made of dark chakra. His skin went gray. His hair turned white. His Sharingan spun wildly. In his hand, lightning gathered. Black lightning, Chidori, but twisted by the cursed seal into something darker. The sound it made was not the chirping of 1,000 birds. It was the wailing of something that wanted to die and take the world with it. Sasuke launched from Madara's statue. Black Chidori leading. Wings spread. Every ounce of power he had, natural talent, Sharingan, cursed seal, hatred, grief, desperation, channeled into a single strike aimed at the heart of the only person in the world who had seen him as himself and not as a means to an end. Naruto raised his arm, armament haki. For the first time in the entire story, the first time anyone in the elemental nations had ever seen it, the black hardening manifested visibly. Naruto's entire right forearm turned black. Not dark, not shadowed. Black. The absolute, light-absorbing black of a force that existed beyond normal physics. It coated his skin like iron dipped in the void. Then he layered ice on top of it. Absolute zero. The coldest possible temperature. The point at which atoms stop. He combined the two, armament haki and logia ice, into a single, unified defense that was harder than anything in the physical world and colder than anything in the thermodynamic one. The fist met the Chidori. The impact did not destroy the waterfall. The impact froze it. The entire waterfall, 100-foot cascade of roaring water, stopped. Froze in mid-flow. A wall of ice caught between the two statues. Each droplet crystallized in place. The roar replaced by absolute silence. The river below froze. The pool at the base froze. The mist froze and fell as snow. The statues of Hashirama and Madara, stone, ancient, enduring, were encased in ice so thick that their features disappeared beneath layers of frost. The shockwave blew outward. Trees at the top of the valley snapped and froze simultaneously. The cliffs on both sides turned white. The sound was a single, massive crack that echoed across the land of fire, heard in villages miles away, misidentified as thunder by people who looked up at the clear sky and shrugged. At the point of contact, Sasuke's black Chidori met Naruto's ice-coated haki fist, and the Chidori died. The lightning scattered. Froze in the air. Literal frozen lightning. Black arcs of electricity suspended in ice crystals, captured and stopped. The dark chakra of the cursed seal met absolute zero and slowed and stopped and crystallized. Sasuke's hand, the one that held the Chidori, went numb. Then his arm, then his shoulder. The cold raced through him faster than the cursed seal could fight it. His wings frosted over, his gray skin cracked with ice. The Sharingan in his eyes spun desperately, recording everything, understanding nothing. He looked into Naruto's face, into those eyes, open now, fully open, no sleep mask, no lazy droop, no pretense of indifference. Blue eyes that held something vast and cold and impossibly sad. "I don't want to fight you," Naruto said, so quiet that only Sasuke could hear it over the cracking of the frozen valley. "Fighting is exhausting, but you're my teammate, and teammates don't let each other walk into the dark alone." Sasuke's mouth opened. A sound came out, not a word. Something between a sob and a scream, muffled by the cold, torn between the cursed seal screaming go and something deeper, something buried under years of hatred and ambition, screaming stay. "Shut up," Sasuke managed. "You don't know. You can't." "I know." Naruto's free hand, the left one not coated in haki, came up and grabbed Sasuke's face. Gently, the way you'd hold something fragile. Ice time. The ice spread from his palm across Sasuke's face. Down his neck, across his chest, over his wings, down his arms, the cursed seal marks freezing and going dormant wherever the ice touched, down his legs, his feet, his toes. Sasuke Uchiha froze. Not dead, alive, preserved in perfect stasis, every cell suspended, every function maintained, the ice keeping him in a state between moments. His eyes were the last to freeze, and Naruto saw something. Not hatred, not rage, not ambition, relief. The tiniest flicker of relief, frozen in amber, in the eyes of a boy who had been running for so long that being stopped, being held, being kept, being frozen in place by someone who cared enough to not let him go, was the closest thing to peace he'd felt in years. Naruto held the frozen Sasuke for a moment. Then he lifted him, over his shoulder, like a popsicle. The frozen Uchiha was heavy, the ice added weight, and the cursed seal form had bulk. But Naruto carried him without strain. He looked at the valley of the end, at what he'd done. The entire valley was frozen. Both statues, Hashirama and Madara, the founders, the rivals, the ghosts of a conflict that had spawned 100 more, entombed in ice. The waterfall stopped forever in mid-cascade, a frozen monument to the moment two boys had met on this same ground, and one had refused to let the other fall. The river, the cliffs, the trees. The sky itself seemed colder, the blue deeper, the air clearer. The silence was total. No water, no wind, no birds, just ice and snow and the breathing of one boy carrying another through a landscape he had rewritten. "Heavy," Naruto said. He shifted Sasuke on his shoulder, started walking, one foot in front of the other, the long road back to Konoha. The snow fell around him as he walked. His snow. The sky was clear, but it snowed anyway, because the boy walking through the frozen valley was sad in a way that even he, with all his laziness, all his indifference, all his practiced calm, couldn't fully contain. The sadness leaked out as cold, as snowflakes, as the quiet, persistent winter that followed him wherever he went, he walked. The retrieval team was scattered along the route. Naruto found them as he walked, felt them through observation haki, and adjusted his path. Choji was first. Collapsed at the base of a tree, out of chakra and out of chips, but alive. Medical teams from Konoha were already on the way. Naruto could feel them approaching. He paused long enough to lay a thin layer of ice over Choji's worst wounds, not healing, cooling, reducing inflammation, slowing blood loss. A battlefield medic's trick from a life he half remembered. Neji next, sitting against a rock, an arrow hole in his shoulder, eyes closed, breathing, alive. Naruto paused. Neji's eyes opened. "Did you get him?" Neji asked. Naruto shifted the frozen Sasuke on his shoulder. Neji looked at the ice block, at the face frozen inside, at Naruto. Fate? Sleep. A ghost of a smile on Neji's face. He closed his eyes again. Kiba and Akamaru, bruised and bitten but standing. Kiba opened his mouth to say something, probably something loud, and then saw the frozen Sasuke and closed it. "Yeah," Kiba said after a moment, "that tracks." Shikamaru, sitting in a clearing, Tamari nearby. Shikamaru looked at Naruto, looked at the popsicle on his shoulder, and rubbed his temples. "Troublesome," Shikamaru said. "Agreed." Naruto replied. They shared a look. The look of two people who understood that the word troublesome could contain universes of meaning. Konoha's gates. Sunset. The retrieval team limping home. Medical squads meeting them at the entrance. Tsunade herself, standing at the gate, arms crossed, watching. Naruto walked through the gates last, alone. Sasuke on his shoulder. The guards at the gate stared. The civilians who had gathered, rumors travel fast, stared. Tsunade stared. Naruto walked up to the fifth Hokage and set the frozen Sasuke down in front of her, standing upright on the road, a perfect crystal statue of a boy who had tried to leave. "Delivery," Naruto said. Tsunade looked at the frozen Uchiha, Sharingan still visible behind the ice. Cursed seal marks frozen in place, wings of dark chakra crystallized and still. "Is he alive?" "Yes." "Will the ice thaw?" "When I let it." "When will you let it?" Naruto looked at the frozen Sasuke, at the face inside the ice, at the relief still visible in those frozen eyes. "When he's ready." Tsunade opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "That's not how medicine works. It's how ice works." Tsunade stared at him for a long time. Then she rubbed her forehead and sighed. "Get him to the hospital, and get yourself to the hospital, and then go to sleep, you impossible child." "I was already planning on sleeping." "I know." Naruto walked into the village. The streets were quiet. The people who saw him, who saw the frozen Uchiha being carried away by medical teams, who saw the blonde boy walking alone with snowflakes in his hair and frost on his clothes, watched in silence. Some with fear, some with awe, some with something they hadn't felt toward the demon brat in 12 years of hatred. Respect. Naruto didn't notice. Noticing would require caring about their opinions, and caring about their opinions would require energy, and energy was for napping. He walked through the village, past the academy where he'd frozen the field, past the training ground where he'd frozen Kakashi, past the ramen shop where he'd eaten 1,000 quiet meals, past the park benches where he'd slept 1,000 quiet afternoons. He walked to the Hokage monument, climbed to the top, sat on the fourth Hokage's head, his father's head, though only a handful of people knew it. He sat cross-legged, looked at the village below. The lights coming on as evening fell, the tiny people living their tiny lives. The hospital where Sasuke was being stored, still frozen, still preserved, as it's still carrying that expression of relief. Naruto pulled his sleep mask down. The temperature around the monument dropped. Frost crept across the stone. The stars above seemed brighter in the cold air, sharper, closer. In the mindscape, Kurama stirred beneath 6 feet of ice. For once, the fox didn't scream, didn't roar, didn't threaten. It watched through the seal, through the connection it shared with its jailer, and it saw the boy sitting on the mountain. "You brought him back." Kurama's voice was quiet, almost uncertain. Naruto didn't respond. "You froze an entire valley. You used power you don't even fully understand. You carried that Uchiha brat across miles of forest. For what? Silence. Because a girl cried? Because a teammate asked? Because it was the right thing to do. Naruto's voice was barely a whisper. And doing the right thing is all there is. Everything else is just noise. Kurama was quiet for a long time. The ice around the fox seemed for just a moment a fraction of a degree less cold. You're a strange human. I'm a tired human. Those are not mutually exclusive. The ghost of a smile on Naruto's face, the first real smile in days. Small, barely there, but real. Arara, the fox makes a joke. I do not joke. I am the nine-tailed. Good night, Kurama. Do not use my good night. Silence, deep, frozen silence. In the mindscape, Kurama's eyes, burning, ancient, furious, softened. A fraction. An amount so small that no one would ever notice. Good night, brat. Naruto Uzumaki, Genin of Konohagakure, Jinchuriki of the Nine Tails, reincarnation of Admiral Aokiji, the ice demon of Konoha, the boy who froze the Valley of the End and carried his friend home through the snow, pulled his sleep mask down and fell asleep on his father's stone face. The village below him went about its evening. Lights flickered, people moved, the world continued. Snow fell, gentle, quiet, impossible in the summer heat, but falling anyway, because the boy on the mountain was dreaming. And when he dreamed, the world dreamed with him. Cold, beautiful. Still, 3 days later, they thawed Sasuke. Naruto stood in the hospital room. Tsunade was there. Kakashi was there. Sakura was there, hands clenched, eyes red from days of crying and waiting. Anbu were posted at every entrance. Naruto placed his hand on the ice block. The ice didn't melt. It receded, flowed back into his palm. Absorbed. Returned to the body it came from. Sasuke's color returned. His skin warmed, his eyes unfroze, blinked, focused. He was lying on a hospital bed, disoriented, the cursed seal dormant and sealed by a suppression formula Kakashi had applied to the ice surface while Sasuke slept. Sasuke looked at the ceiling, at Kakashi, at Tsunade, at Sakura, who was crying again, at Naruto. You. Sasuke's voice was hoarse, weak. The voice of a boy who had been frozen in stasis for 3 days and was only now processing that he had lost, that he had been stopped, that the boy he dismissed as a lazy nobody had beaten him so thoroughly that there was no argument left. You froze me. Yeah. Like a popsicle. Yeah. Sasuke stared at him. The silence stretched. Sakura held her breath. Kakashi watched. Did you carry me back? Over my shoulder. Through the village? Through the gate. Lots of people saw. Sasuke closed his eyes. His jaw worked. Something was happening behind that face. The grinding of gears, both the collision of pride and gratitude, of rage and relief, of hatred for what Naruto had done, and the terrifying, undeniable knowledge that Naruto had done it because he cared. I'm going to kill you, Sasuke said, but there was no heat in it, no venom. It was the exhausted, automatic protest of a boy who didn't know how else to respond to kindness. Okay, Naruto yawned. But later, I need a nap. He walked out, down the hall, out of the hospital, into the sunlight. Sakura ran after him, caught him at the door. Naruto. He stopped, didn't turn around. Thank you. Her voice cracked. Thank you for bringing him back. Naruto was quiet for a moment. Then he looked over his shoulder. Those lazy blue eyes, half-lidded, permanent droop, the face of a boy who looked like he was always about to fall asleep. You cried, he said simply. I told you, I don't handle crying well. He walked out into the street, found his bicycle, leaning against a lamppost where he'd left it days ago, climbed on, started pedaling. The road froze under his tires, a thin line of ice that glittered in the sunlight and thawed 30 seconds behind him. He pedaled through the village, past the market, past the academy, past the training grounds. People saw him, the ice demon of Konoha, the boy who had frozen the Valley of the End and carried an Uchiha home on his shoulder. They watched him ride by. A 12-year-old on a rusted bicycle, sleep mask on his forehead, leaving a trail of ice behind him like a comet leaving a trail of light. Some of them waved. Not many. Not yet. But some. Naruto didn't wave back. Waving required removing a hand from the handlebars. And he was lazy. And the hill ahead was steep. And the nap spot on the other side of the village, a park bench under an old oak tree, was calling to him with the urgency of a mission he actually cared about. He pedaled up the hill. The ice under his tires crackled and sparkled. The sun was warm on his face. The village stretched below him, whole, damaged, rebuilding, alive. He reached the park bench, lay down. The wood frosted under him. The oak tree's lower branches grew icicles. A bird landed on a branch, looked at the ice, and flew away. Naruto pulled his sleep mask down, crossed his arms over his chest, felt the village around him through observation haki. Thousands of lives, thousands of heartbeats, thousands of tiny stories playing out in a world that had no idea what was sleeping on a park bench in the afternoon sun. He breathed out. The breath turned to mist. The mist turned to snowflakes. The snowflakes drifted down and settled on his jacket like tiny, perfect, cold little stars. A force of nature wearing a sleep mask. A boy who could end a war by standing up. A soul from another world who had learned in 2 lifetimes that the most powerful thing you could do was the right thing. And the most important thing you could do after that was rest. He slept. The world turned. The ice stayed. And somewhere in the basement of the Hokage Tower, Tsunade sat at the third's old desk, her desk now, though it never felt like hers, and read the Anbu retrieval report for the second time. The paper was 3 pages long. It described the Valley of the End as a flash-frozen geographical anomaly spanning approximately 2 square kilometers. It described Sasuke Uchiha as cryogenically preserved via unknown jutsu, vitals stable, core temperature negative 41 degrees Celsius. It described Naruto Uzumaki as departed the scene on foot, ambient temperature reduction in his wake, consistent with previous observations, currently located on a park bench in District 7, sleeping. Tsunade picked up a pen. At the top of the document in the classification box, someone had already stamped threat assessment in red ink, standard protocol for anomalous shinobi capabilities. She stared at those words for a long time, then she crossed them out, wrote in her own hand, in ink that smelled faintly of the sake she'd spilled on her desk an hour ago. Asset. She underlined it twice. She put the report in the drawer. She poured another cup. She looked out the window at the village, at the distant white line of the frozen valley, visible on the southern horizon, a scar on the landscape that would take weeks to thaw. And she said nothing, because sometimes the most honest response to something beyond comprehension was silence and alcohol, and Tsunade had never been short on either. 3 years passed. They passed the way seasons pass when you're not counting them, quietly, unevenly, with entire months disappearing into the fog of routine. The village rebuilt what the invasion had broken. Sasuke served his probation under Kakashi's supervision, silent and simmering. The cursed seal suppressed but not forgotten. Sakura trained under Tsunade and became something dangerous in her own right. Kakashi read his books and filed his reports and pretended he wasn't watching the rooftops for a blonde head that hadn't been seen in months. Because Naruto left, not dramatically, not with a speech or a farewell or a packed bag. He'd told Tsunade on a Tuesday that he was going to look around for a while, and she'd said, "Where?" And he'd said, "Wherever the road goes." And she'd said, "For how long?" And he'd said, "Until it stops going somewhere." And she'd stamped a long-term travel permit and watched him pedal away on that rusted bicycle with his sleep mask on his forehead and a bag of rice balls in the basket. Jiraiya went with him sometimes. The Toad Sage and the Ice Demon, wandering the elemental nations together in the least likely buddy comedy in shinobi history. Jiraiya gathered intelligence on Akatsuki. Naruto gathered naps on park benches in foreign countries. They worked well together because Jiraiya talked enough for both of them, and Naruto listened without interrupting, and because when the inevitable trouble found them, and it always found them, the trouble rarely survived the first 4 seconds. Naruto grew. Not just taller, although he grew tall, 6 feet by 15, lean and long-limbed like the man whose memories he carried. His face sharpened, his jaw set. The baby fat of childhood burned away and left something that looked, from certain angles, eerily like the 4th Hokage, if the 4th Hokage had never smiled and was perpetually on the edge of falling asleep. He wore a long dark coat now, high collar, loose fit, the kind of coat you could sleep in standing up. No kanji on the back. Not yet. He hadn't earned the word he wanted to put there. Or maybe he had, and he just didn't care enough to embroider. The ice got colder. Not in any way that could be measured by the instruments available to the elemental nations. But the Anbu sensor teams who tracked his movements at a safe distance, always at a safe distance, note in their quarterly reports that the ambient temperature drop around Naruto Uzumaki had increased from localized 3-degree reduction within 10-foot radius to regional temperature anomaly detectable at 200 meters. His passive cold was growing. The ice he left behind took longer to melt. The frost that formed under his feet was thicker. He was becoming more of what he was. More ice, more still, more cold. And when he came back, 3 years later, 15 years old, tall and quiet and wearing a coat that trailed behind him in the summer wind, nobody recognized him. He walked through the main gate at noon on a Wednesday. The gate guards checked his papers, glanced at his face, glanced at the papers again, and waved him through without a second look. He was just another traveler. Tall, lean, blue eyes half closed. Nothing special. He walked down the main street, past the market stalls, past the ramen shop where Tucci was serving a lunch crowd, past the academy where children who hadn't been born when he left were now learning to throw kunai. The village was the same and different in the way that villages are after 3 years. New paint on old buildings, new faces in old doorways, the same sunlight on the same dust. A chunin was drinking at a stall on the corner. It was noon, which said everything about his career trajectory. He saw the tall stranger walking past, the dark coat, the lazy stride, the way the air seemed to cool as the stranger passed, and something about it annoyed him. Maybe it was the indifference. Maybe it was the coat. Maybe it was the 3 beers and the bad morning, and the fact that his ex-girlfriend was dating a jonin now. He grabbed the bottle off the counter and threw it. It was a good throw, as drunken throws go. Spiraling. Accurate. Aimed at the back of the stranger's head with the kind of spiteful precision that only alcohol and self-loathing could produce. The bottle hit the stranger's shoulder. It shattered. Every shard froze midair. Suspended. The beer inside crystallized into amber ice and fell in clinking pieces across the dusty road. Frost crept from the point of impact across the stranger's coat, down his arm, across the ground beneath his feet. The temperature in a 10-foot radius dropped 20 degrees in a heartbeat. The drunk chunin's hand was still extended. The skin on his fingertips was white. He yanked his hand back, shaking it, suddenly very sober. The stranger didn't look up, didn't turn around, didn't break stride. Arara, just that, low, flat, the verbal equivalent of a glacier shrugging. The chunin stared. The market stall owner stared. 3 civilians on the sidewalk stared. And then the realization spread, not fast, not all at once, but in a slow wave of recognition and cold, in the memory of a boy on a bicycle who left a trail of ice behind him everywhere he went. Tochi came out of the ramen shop, looked at the tall stranger walking away, looked at the frozen beer shards on the ground, looked at the frost spreading across the road. "Naruto?" he said. The stranger's hand came up in a lazy wave, didn't turn around, kept walking. He was back. Tsunade received the gate report 14 minutes later. She was in the middle of approving a budget allocation for the hospital's new wing. She read the report, set down her pen, picked up her sake, drank the entire cup. "Get me Kakashi," she said. Kakashi was there in 3 minutes, which meant he'd already heard. "He's taller," Kakashi said, leaning against the doorframe, orange book in hand. He froze a chunin's beer. Passively, passively. Kakashi's visible eye crinkled, not with amusement, with something more complicated. "Where is he now?" "Where do you think?" Kakashi found him on the same park bench, the same oak tree, the same frost on the wooden slats, the same icicles forming on the lower branches. Naruto lay on his back, coat pulled around him like a dark blanket, sleep mask down, arms crossed over his chest. He looked like a monument to the concept of not being bothered. Kakashi sat on the other end of the bench. The cold seeped through his pants immediately. He ignored it. "Welcome back," Kakashi said. You've been gone 3 years. Has it been that long?" "Tsunade wants a debrief. Tomorrow." She said today. "Tomorrow." Kakashi turned a page in his book. He knew when to push and when not to push. This was a not to push moment. "Fine, tomorrow." Naruto's sleep mask shifted. One blue eye, half-lidded, peered out. "How's Sasuke?" "Complicated. He was always complicated. More so now." The eye closed. The sleep mask settled. "I'll deal with it. Tomorrow." "You'll deal with everything tomorrow?" "If possible." Kakashi sat on the frozen bench next to the most dangerous person in the land of fire and read his book and said nothing more. And the afternoon passed in ice and silence, and it was, somehow, exactly the homecoming both of them needed. The world, however, did not care about homecomings. The world had its own schedule, and that schedule said Akatsuki. The intelligence had been trickling in for years. Jiraiya's spy network, Anbu's long-range surveillance, intercepted communications between hidden villages. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. A group of S-rank missing 9, organized under a single banner, systematically hunting and capturing the tailed beasts. The one tail was taken, the 2 tails, the 3 tails. One by one, the Biju were being collected like postage stamps by people who treated genocide as a Tuesday afternoon errand. They knew about Naruto. Of course, they knew about Naruto. Orochimaru, in the way that snakes share venom, had passed the information along before his final falling out with the organization. It traveled from Orochimaru to Sasori to Pain to the rest, and by the time it finished circulating, every member of Akatsuki had the same note in their mental files. The 9 Tails Jinchuriki is anomalous. Ice-based abilities of unknown origin. Extreme threat level, do not engage without preparation. Kasame Hoshigaki read that note and grinned so wide that even Itachi noticed. An ice user, Kasame said, running his hand along Samahada's scaled surface. The sword shivered with anticipation. A real one. Not one of those Yuki clan kids with their pretty mirrors and their fragile little jutsu. The real deal. Absolute zero, they said. The reports suggest we should avoid direct engagement, Itachi said. His voice was flat. It was always flat. But there was something underneath it. The faintest tension. The kind that only someone who had known Itachi for years would notice. Avoid it? I've been waiting my whole life for this. Kisame hefted Samehada onto his shoulder. Water against ice. The ultimate matchup. This is going to be beautiful. It is going to be cold, Itachi corrected. That too. They found him on the road between the land of fire and the land of hot springs, which was ironic in ways that neither the universe nor Naruto appreciated. He was riding his bicycle. A new one. Slightly less rusted, slightly larger, still absurd. The road was dirt. The weather was warm. A thin line of ice trailed behind the back tire, glittering in the afternoon sun before evaporating 30 seconds later. Kasame and Itachi stood in the road ahead. 2 figures in black cloaks with red clouds. One massive blue-skinned shark tooth carrying a sword the size of a surfboard. One lean, dark-haired Sharingan spinning lazily in eyes that had seen too much and cared too little. Naruto pedaled toward them, slowed, stopped, put one foot down on the dirt, looked at them. Arara. Kasame's grin could have swallowed a boat. Naruto Uzumaki, the ice demon of Konoha. I've heard so much about you. I was on my way to a hot spring. That's going to have to wait. Kasame swung Samehada off his shoulder. The sword scales rippled, sensing chakra, already hungry. I'm Kasame Hoshigaki. This is Itachi Uchiha. We're here for the 9 tails. Naruto looked at Kasame, looked at Samehada, looked at Itachi, whose Sharingan was recording everything with the precision of a camera that never blinked. His observation haki read the field in a single pulse. Kasame's intent was pure combat hunger, bright and honest, the joy of a predator who had found something worth hunting. Itachi's intent was complicated, layered, wrapped in duty and regret, and a deep, quiet resignation that Naruto recognized because he'd felt it before, in another life, in a man who wore a white coat and walked across frozen oceans. The fox is frozen, Naruto said. Has been for years. You'd need an ice pick and a century to get it out. We'll figure that part out later. Kasame planted Samehada's tip in the dirt. Right now, I just want to fight you. Water against ice. Isn't that something? Naruto got off the bicycle, leaned it against a tree, adjusted his coat, pushed his sleep mask from his forehead into his hair, out of the way. He looked at the river valley they were standing in, a wide, shallow river running through a rocky gorge, surrounded by trees and cliffs. Water everywhere, Kasame's dream battlefield. Water, Naruto said, almost to himself. Again, water-style great shark bomb. Kasame moved first. Because Kasame always moved first. He was the kind of fighter who believed that the first blow was the only one that mattered. And even though he was wrong about that, his first blows were devastating enough that the distinction was academic. Samehada swept upward, and a wall of water surged from the river, not a wave, a bomb, a concentrated mass of chakra-infused water shaped like a massive shark. Jaws open, eyes blank, screaming toward Naruto with enough force to demolish a building. Naruto's hand came up, palm out, fingers spread. Ice Age. The air cracked. The shark froze, not gradually, not from the front backward. The entire construct crystallized in a single instant. A 50-foot sculpture of a water shark suspended 3 feet off the ground. Every detail preserved in blue-white ice, jaws open, teeth gleaming. The internal chakra structure visible through the transparent crystal-like veins in an anatomy model. The river behind it froze. Shore to shore, surface to riverbed, a quarter mile in every direction. The gorge walls frosted over. The trees on both banks turned white. Icicles formed on the cliff faces in seconds, hanging like daggers. The temperature drop was so severe that the air itself condensed, a visible wave of fog rolling outward from the flash freeze line, the atmosphere adjusting to the sudden, violent removal of all heat from the area. Kasame stared at the frozen shark. His frozen shark, his most powerful single-target water jutsu, turned into a decoration. He grinned wider. Wonderful, he charged. Samahata swinging. The sword sensed the cold and shied from it. The scales retracting. The blade trying to pull away from the approaching absolute zero, the way a hand pulls back from a flame. Kasame forced it forward through sheer strength and will. Naruto's right arm turned black. Armament haki. The hardening spread from his fist to his forearm to his elbow in under a second. Visible, physical. The light-absorbing blackness of a force that this world had no name for and no defense against. Ice formed over the haki coating. Crystalline, sharp, layered like armor, but cold like the end of everything. Samahata met the ice-coated haki fist. The collision produced a sound that had no business existing outside of natural disasters. A crack boom that echoed off the gorge walls and shattered every icicle within 100 feet. Samahata's scale splintered at the point of contact. The sword, the legendary sentient blade that ate chakra for breakfast, that had shaved the skin off 1,000 enemies, that was alive and hungry and vicious, cracked against absolute zero armament haki and screamed. The sword actually screamed, a high, keening vibration that Kasame felt through the handle and up his arms and into his teeth. He was driven back 15 feet. His sandals carved trenches in the frozen river surface. Samahata's tip was coated in frost so thick it looked like the sword had grown a beard. Water style, 1,000 feeding sharks. Kasame slammed the hilt of Samahata into the frozen river. The ice cracked, not from the cold, from the force, and water surged up through the fissure. Not one shark, 1,000. A roiling school of water constructs, each one the size of a man, each one razor-toothed and chakra-fueled, bursting from the broken ice and converging on Naruto from every direction. Naruto didn't raise his hand this time. He exhaled, a single breath. The moisture in the exhalation froze and expanded and detonated outward in a radial wave of cold that hit the shark school like a wall. Every shark that touched the wave froze solid. The ones behind them froze. The ones behind those froze. The wave expanded outward in a perfect sphere, freezing everything: water, air, stone, sound, until a dome of absolute zero ice encapsulated a 200-foot radius around Naruto, and every single one of Kasame's 1,000 sharks was 1,000 frozen sculptures scattered across the interior like a macabre aquarium display. Kasame burst from the ice beneath Naruto's feet. He'd used a substitution, replacing himself with a water clone at the last second and swimming through the river under the frozen surface, breaking through behind Naruto's position. Smart, ruthless. Exactly the kind of move that had made Kasame one of the most dangerous men alive. He came up swinging. Samehada overhead, two-handed, the sword's remaining scales flaring with absorbed chakra, a blow aimed at splitting Naruto from crown to crotch. The sword passed through Naruto's head, through his chest, through his torso. The blade exited between his legs and cratered the frozen ground. Naruto's body, both halves, was ice. Transparent, crystalline. The two halves of his bisected form hung in the air for a moment, perfectly smooth at the cut line. The internal structure of an ice Logia body visible in every facet. No blood, no bone, no organs. Just ice. Dense, cold, impossibly beautiful ice. The two halves snapped back together, seamlessly, instantly. Naruto reformed from the bisection the way water reforms after you drag a finger through it, without effort, without thought, without any indication that being cut in half was anything more than mildly inconvenient. Samehada tried to absorb the cold. The sword's scales opened, the living blade's natural instinct to consume whatever it touched activating automatically. Ice-cold energy poured into the sword's chakra network. The sword froze from the inside out. Samahada's scales locked. Its internal movement stopped. The living blade went rigid, coated in frost, its own energy pathways crystallized by the absolute zero power it had tried to eat. The sword didn't die. It wasn't that simple, but it went dormant, hibernating. The shark sword equivalent of being put in an ice bath it couldn't wake up from. Kasame felt the sword go still in his hands, felt it stop responding, felt the cold racing through the handle toward his fingers. He dropped Samahada, jumped back. His hands were blue to the wrists. He was panting, grinning, bleeding from a dozen places where ice shards had nicked him during the reforming. His eyes were alive with something that might have been joy. "You're everything they said," Kasame breathed. "You're more." Naruto's arm was still black with haki. His coat was torn where Samahada had passed through him. The coat couldn't reform, even if his body could. He looked at the frozen gorge, the frozen river, the frozen sharks, the frozen sword. "You're pretty good," Naruto said. Genuine, no mockery. For a water user fighting in an ice age. Kasame laughed, open, honest. The laugh of a man who had spent his entire life looking for a fight that mattered and had finally found one. "One more round? Just one?" Naruto's observation haki pinged. Not from Kasame, from above, from the cliff edge, from the Sharingan eyes watching everything from a distance that Itachi had calculated precisely as outside the effective radius of anything Naruto had demonstrated so far. "Your partner is about to leave," Naruto said. "Without you." Kasame's grin didn't waver. "Itachi's practical like that." "Ice time." Naruto was touching Kasame's chest. He'd closed the distance during the sentence, not with speed that could be tracked, not with a body flicker, just with the absolute absence of wasted movement that came from 2 lifetimes of combat experience. One moment he was 10 feet away, the next his palm was flat against Kasame's collarbone. The ice spread, fast, down both arms, across the torso, down the legs. Kasame's grin froze in place, literally, the expression preserved in ice, the last thing his face would show until someone thawed him. Pure, unbridled happiness, a frozen shark man, grinning. Standing upright on a frozen river in a frozen gorge, surrounded by 1,000 frozen sharks and 1 frozen living sword. Naruto stepped back, looked at his work, looked up at the cliff where Itachi had been standing. Itachi was gone, retreated, vanished without a trace, without a sound, without a single jutsu deployed. The Sharingan had recorded everything, every technique, every speed, every detail of the ice and the haki and the Loggia body. Itachi had filed it all away in a mind that forgot nothing, and his single internal note, the one he would carry with him until the day he died, which was closer than anyone knew, was simple. Do not fight this one unless necessary. It was the most honest assessment Itachi Uchiha had ever made about anyone, including himself. Naruto looked at the frozen Kasame for a moment. Then he walked back to his bicycle, climbed on, adjusted the basket, started pedaling. He left the frozen gorge behind him. Kasame would thaw in about 4 hours. Naruto had used a lighter touch than usual, out of something that wasn't quite respect and wasn't quite fondness, but lived in the neighborhood of both. The Anbu tracking team that had been following at a 2-mile distance would find the scene, thaw the shark man, and write a report that would make Tsunade drink an entire bottle of sake in one sitting. In the mindscape, Kurama had watched the entire fight through the seal's connection. The fox was still frozen, still buried from neck to tail in ice that hadn't thawed in 8 years, but its eyes burned with something new. "You didn't use my chakra," Kurama said. Naruto, pedaling, didn't answer. "Against an S-rank missing nin, a member of Akatsuki. You didn't even consider it. Didn't need it. You never need it. That is not the point. The point is that I am the most powerful. Night, Kurama." "It is the middle of the afternoon." Naruto added another layer of ice to the fox's encasement. The roaring became muffled, then silent. He pedaled on. The road between the land of fire and the land of sound was unremarkable. Dirt, rocks, the occasional tree. The kind of road that existed because people walked on it, not because anyone had planned it. Naruto was riding his bicycle along it 6 days after the Kasame fight, moving at the speed of a man who had no particular destination and no particular hurry to reach it. The sun was setting. The sky was orange and purple. The air was warm, or it would have been, 30 feet from where Naruto was. He felt the chakra signature before he saw the person. Observation. Haki painted the picture. Strong, sharp, complicated, a fire burning hot and unsteady. The signature of someone powerful who was also deeply unstable. He knew this signature, had carried it on his shoulder, frozen, through miles of forest. Sasuke Uchiha was standing in the road ahead, not waiting, not blocking, just standing, as if he'd been walking in the opposite direction and had stopped when he felt what was approaching. He wore a white shirt, open at the chest, purple rope belt, a sword at his hip that hadn't been there 3 years ago. His hair was longer, his eyes were harder. The Sharingan wasn't active, but its presence was felt, a latent potential like coals waiting for breath. Naruto stopped the bicycle, put a foot down. The ice under his tire crackled softly. They looked at each other across 30 feet of dirt road. Naruto, Sasuke said. Sasuke, silence. A bird sang somewhere in the trees. The sunset painted both of them in gold. Sasuke's jaw worked. The muscles in his face moved through several configurations, none of them settling on an expression. He looked thinner than Naruto remembered, sharper, like someone had taken the boy from the academy and filed away everything soft until only edges remained. "Why did you come after me?" Sasuke asked. "At the valley." Naruto looked at him. The question sat in the air between them, heavy, the kind of question that people build entire conversations around, entire relationships, entire arcs of personal growth and confrontation and resolution. Naruto thought about it for an uncomfortably long time, long enough that the silence became its own presence in the conversation, a third person on the road holding its breath. Sakura cried. Naruto said. Sasuke stared at him. The Sharingan flickered, almost activated from sheer disbelief. "That's it? That's it." A beat. The bird stopped singing. The sunset deepened. "Also, you're annoying to replace." Sasuke's mouth opened, closed. He looked at Naruto, at the sleep mask on the forehead, the half-lidded eyes, the coat too big for a 15-year-old but worn like it had always been there, and something cracked behind his expression. Something small, something that had been locked up for years. He didn't smile. Sasuke Uchiha didn't smile. But the tension left his shoulders. His hand fell from the sword hilt. His breathing, which had been the controlled inhale-exhale of someone ready for a fight, became normal. "Orochimaru's dead," Sasuke said. "I know. I killed him. I figured. I'm going back to Konoha." Naruto tilted his head, studied Sasuke's face, read his intent through observation haki. No deception, no hidden agenda, just exhaustion and something underneath it that might have been, in the right light, the first tremor of wanting to come home. "Okay," Naruto said. "That's all you have to say? What else is there? You're going back. That's good. I was heading that direction anyway." Naruto patted the bicycle seat behind him. "Want a ride?" "I am not sitting on the back of your bicycle. It's a long walk. I'll manage." They walked together. Naruto pushing the bicycle, Sasuke walking alongside. Neither of them spoke for the first 2 miles. The ice under the bicycle tire left a thin line on the road. Sasuke walked on the other side, carefully outside the frost radius, though the cold still nipped at his edges. "You've gotten stronger," Sasuke said eventually. "I was always strong. I've gotten taller." "That's not what I know what you meant." More silence. Then quietly, "Thank you." Naruto didn't look at him. "For what?" "For not letting me go." The bicycle's chain clicked. The ice crackled. The last light of the sunset faded into blue. "Don't mention it," Naruto said. "Seriously, don't. It would require me to have a conversation about feelings, and feelings are exhausting." Sasuke's mouth twitched. Not a smile, but close. Closer than it had been in years. They walked back to Konoha together as the stars came out and the road froze behind them in a thin silver line that glistened under the moonlight, like a path that led, impossibly, in the direction of something that might, someday, if you squinted, resemble peace. Sasuke's return was not simple. It was never going to be simple. There were hearings and councils and the Hokage's judgment and the quiet fury of a village that remembered a boy who had walked away from them toward a snake. But Tsunade ruled in his favor. Partly because Kakashi vouched for him, partly because Sakura testified, partly because Naruto stood in the back of the council chamber with his hands in his pockets and his eyes half closed, and the ambient temperature in the room dropped 6 degrees. And nobody on the council was brave enough to vote against the known preferences of a boy who could freeze a river valley solid. Sasuke was placed under supervision, given restrictions, watched. He bore it. Not well, not gracefully, but he bore it, and the village moved on, as villages do, as the world moved toward the thing that was coming, the thing that was already on its way, riding a ripple of malice that Naruto's observation haki could feel from across the continent like a drumbeat in the dark. Pain came on a Thursday. The morning started normally. Clear skies, market day, the village of Konohagakure going about its 10,000 small routines, the baker baking, the academy teaching, the gate guards guarding, the sun shining on a village that had no idea it had 90 seconds left of normalcy. Naruto was asleep. He was always asleep. He was on the Hokage monument, stretched out on the fourth stone head, sleep mask down, coat spread under him like a blanket, one arm dangling over the edge of the carved hairline. His bicycle was parked against the third stone nose. A thin layer of frost coated the rock beneath him, white against the gray, like nature's way of marking his territory. The first explosion woke him up. Not the sound, the observation haki pulse. A spike of hostile intent so massive, so concentrated, so fundamentally opposed to the concept of human life that it cut through Naruto's sleep the way a scream cuts through silence. His eyes opened behind the mask. His haki expanded outward, painting the village in his mind's eye. And what it painted was wrong. 6 chakra signatures. Identical. Impossibly identical. Like the same person copied 6 times, each one a node in a network connected to a single distant source. They were descending on the village from multiple angles, and behind each one was a wave of purpose that Naruto could read like a headline. Destruction. He pushed the sleep mask up. Below him, the first Shinra Tensei detonated. It hit the eastern quarter of the village like the fist of a god. Buildings didn't crumble. They exploded outward from a central point. Stone and wood and glass, and people launched in every direction by a gravitational force that had no business existing outside of theoretical physics. A perfect circle of devastation expanding outward at the speed of sound, flattening everything, erasing structures that had stood for decades in a single, blasphemous instant. Screams rose. Dust billowed. The second Shinra Tensei hit the northern residential district. The third hit the market. The fourth, Naruto stood up. The temperature on the Hokage monument dropped. Not a subtle, ambient reduction. A violent, immediate atmospheric collapse. The air around Naruto going from summer warmth to deep winter in under a second. Frost exploded outward from his feet across the stone surface of the monument. The stone cracked. Ice formed on the carved faces of the Hokage, every one of them, first through fifth, suddenly wearing masks of frost, and then it spread. Down the monument, down the cliff face, across the rooftops nearest the base. Outward, outward, the cold rolled across Konohagakure like a tide coming in, touching everything, coating everything. The temperature of an entire village dropping 15 degrees in 4 seconds. Snow fell. On Konohagakure in the middle of summer, for the first time in the village's history, snow fell. Fat, lazy flakes drifting from a clear blue sky. Impossible. Beautiful. Terrifying, the 6 paths of pain stopped their assault. All 6 of them. The Deva path, the animal path, the Preta path, the human path, the Asura path, the Naraka path paused. Simultaneously. The puppets of a dead god, all turning their ringed eyes upward toward the monument, toward the source of the cold. Something was wrong with the air. The animal path raised its hands to summon the giant dog, the bull, the chameleon, the standard catalog of destruction. The summoning smoke billowed. The creatures materialized, massive, armored, mindless. They charged into walls of ice. The ice erupted from the streets themselves, pillars, barriers, walls of crystalline cold that hadn't been there a heartbeat ago. Ice pillar after ice pillar, rising from the frozen ground like the bars of a cage, blocking the summon's path, funneling them into corridors of ice where their size was a liability and their momentum was a death sentence. The giant dog hit a pillar at full sprint, and the ice didn't budge. The dog bounced off, dazed, and the pillar reformed where it had cracked, thicker than before. The Ashura path raised its arm, the mechanical arm, the one that opened to reveal a chakra cannon capable of leveling a city block. It fired. A beam of concentrated destruction screamed toward the nearest cluster of fleeing civilians. An ice pillar intercepted the beam. The ice detonated on impact. Steam and shrapnel and cold. but the civilians behind it were untouched. Another pillar rose to replace the first, then another, faster than the path could fire. The Deva path, the one with the face of Yahiko, the dead friend, the puppet that Pain wore like a mask, turned its ringed eyes to the Hokage monument. Naruto was standing on the fourth's head, hands in his pockets, sleep mask pushed up, coat billowing in a wind that wasn't wind. It was the air rushing to fill the thermal vacuum his body was creating, the atmosphere itself recoiling from the cold. He hadn't moved. He was watching, taking it in. 6 paths, a network, a puppet master at a distance. The intent behind the attack wasn't destruction for its own sake. It was a message, pain, suffering. The language of someone who had decided that the world needed to hurt in order to learn. Naruto had heard this philosophy before. Different words, different world, different context. But the core was the same. Someone in pain, inflicting pain on others and calling it justice. The Deva path raised its hand toward the monument. Shinra Tensei. The gravitational blast rocketed toward Naruto. A focused wave of repulsive force, strong enough to shatter the stone face of the fourth Hokage, strong enough to reduce a human body to a red stain on a rock face, strong enough to end anything it touched. It hit Naruto. His body detonated, not like a death, not like a kill, like a glass of water thrown against a wall. He shattered outward in every direction, 600 pieces of Naruto scattering across the sky, each one a shard of ice the size of a fist, each one glittering in the sunlight and the snow, each one trailing frost vapor in the air like 600 tiny comets. The Deva path lowered its hand. The other paths resumed their assault. The target was eliminated. The shards stopped. 600 pieces of ice, scattered across a 300-foot radius, suspended in the air. Not falling, not dispersing, hanging like stars, each one humming with cold so intense that the snow around them crystallized into smaller crystals and the air turned to fog. They began moving, not falling, pulling, drawing back together from every direction, from rooftops and streets and the sky itself, 600 pieces of a Logia body calling to each other across the frozen air. They converged on a point above the village center, not the monument, lower, closer, directly above the field of destruction the paths had created. The ice fragments merged, fused, limbs formed from clusters of crystal, a torso assembled from 100 shards, a face materialized, blue eyes, sleep mask, coat reforming from nothing, because the coat was not the coat. The coat was ice, everything was ice. The distinction between Naruto and the cold had long since ceased to matter. He reformed, complete, whole, floating for a single instant above the battlefield before gravity remembered him, and he dropped, landing on a half-destroyed building with a crunch of frost. His coat was gone. The Shinra Tensei had vaporized the fabric, and unlike his body, the coat couldn't reform from ice. He stood in his mesh undershirt and dark pants, barefoot on frozen rubble, snowflakes in his hair, 6 paths of pain, 6 pairs of ringed eyes, all of them locked on the boy who had just been atomized and had reassembled like a puzzle solving itself. The Deva path's expression, Yahiko's face, handsome and dead and puppeted, shifted. Not much. A tightening around the eyes. A micro-adjustment of the mouth. Uncertainty. Pain's 6 paths had fought Kaj, had destroyed villages, had faced the best the ninja world had to offer, and broken every single one. Nothing in the extensive, exhaustive catalog of combat experience that Nagato had accumulated through 6 lifetimes of violence had included this. A person who could not be killed by being destroyed because destruction was not a concept that applied to him. Arara. Naruto looked down at himself, at the missing coat, at the frost forming on his bare skin, not from exposure but from emanation. You blew up my coat. He raised one hand, palm down, fingers spread. Ice Age. The word that had frozen lakes and rivers and valleys in a single battleground. The technique that had been Naruto's signature since childhood. The opening statement of a conversation that only he could have. Was spoken with the same lazy, in a half-interested tone it always was. No drama, no build-up, no screaming of the technique name into the sky. He just said it, and the world obeyed. The ice erupted from where he stood and radiated outward at a speed that was not speed. It was a state change, a phase transition, the fundamental redefinition of the thermal state of matter across an area so large that the concept of area became inadequate and region was more appropriate. The ground froze, the rubble froze, The dust in the air froze and became snow, and the snow became ice, and the ice became glacial, layered, permanent. Streets froze. Buildings, the ones still standing and the ruins of the ones that weren't, turned white. Water pipes underground crystallized, and the frost traveled through the pipe system until every pipe in every building in the affected area was a rod of ice. The air itself condensed, the moisture snapped, freezing into a fog so cold it burned, rolling outward in a wave of white that swallowed everything. Half of Konoha. Not a quarter, not a district. Half of the entire village, from the Hokage monument to the southern wall, from the eastern training grounds to the western residential district. An area of roughly 2 square kilometers, flash frozen to absolute zero in under 4 seconds. The silence was total. Not the silence of a quiet room. The silence of a world where sound itself had been frozen, where the air was too cold and too still for vibrations to propagate, where the medium that carried noise had become a solid, and the concept of hearing was temporarily impossible. In that silence, the 6 paths of pain stood, frozen, each one caught in the exact position they had been in when the ice arrived. The Deva path with one hand raised, the animal path mid-summoning, the Asura path with its cannon deployed, the Preta path absorbing nothing, the human path reaching for a soul it would never grasp, the Naraka path with its mouth open, and the King of Hell half manifested behind it, a spectral face frozen in mid-judgment. 6 statues, 6 paths, 6 instruments of a god's will. Stopped. Naruto dropped from the building. His feet hit the frozen street without a sound. He walked through the ice field, his domain, the physical manifestation of what he was, and he moved between the frozen paths like a man walking through a garden of sculptures. He inspected them closely. His observation haki pulsed outward, reading the connections between the puppets, tracing the chakra threads that linked them to their source, following the signal like a man following a string through a maze. The thread led outward, away from the village, up into the hills, to a point on a paper tree where a ruined body sat in a mechanical chair and a woman with blue hair stood guard. Naruto memorized the direction. Then he walked on. Around him, the village was beginning to respond. The areas outside the freeze zone, the other half of Konoha, untouched, merely very cold, erupted into activity. Ambu squads deployed. Medical teams mobilized. Civilians who had been fleeing the path's assault stopped and turned and stared at the wall of ice that now bisected their village like a glacier had descended overnight. Tsunade was in the middle of the frozen zone. She'd been at the hospital when the attack began, coordinating the response, healing the wounded. When the ice age hit, it froze the building around her. Walls, floors, ceiling, every surface turned to frost, but didn't freeze her. Because Naruto's ice was precise when he wanted it to be. It froze the battlefield. It froze the enemy. It froze the environment. It did not freeze his people. She stood in a corridor of ice, surrounded by frozen walls and frozen floors and frozen pipes, the air around her cold enough to see her breath. And she stared out the window at the landscape, at the village turned to winter. At the 6 paths, visible from here as 6 dark shapes frozen against the white, at the figure walking between them, hands in his pockets, barefoot on ice that would give any other person frostbite in seconds. Shizune, Tsunade said. Yes, Lady Tsunade? Cancel the combat response, pull back all deployed shinobi. But the enemy is frozen. The response is no longer necessary. Tsunade's voice was very level, very controlled, the voice of a woman who was using every year of medical training to keep her heart rate below 140 beats per minute. Naruto has it. Kakashi was on a rooftop at the edge of the freeze zone. He'd been fighting the animal path summons when the ice age hit. The summon he'd been engaging, a giant centipede, armored and vicious, was now a frozen centipede, a 300-foot ice sculpture curving across 3 city blocks. Kakashi stood on its frozen back, Sharingan exposed, and watched Naruto walk through the field of frozen gods. Sensei, Kakashi said quietly to the sky, to the stone face on the monument, to a dead man who couldn't hear him. Your son just saved the village. Again. His voice cracked on the last word. He pretended it was the cold. Naruto walked out of the village, through the gates, the frozen gates, the ice coating the wood and the metal and the hinges, the guards on either side standing in frost that reached their ankles, Through the road beyond, already frozen from his passage, a path of white leading into the hills. Through the trees, each one a crystal tower, branches heavy with ice, the forest transformed into something out of a fairy tale, written by someone with a very cold imagination. He followed the thread his observation Haki had found. The signal from the paths, the string leading to the puppeteer. The walk took 40 minutes. He didn't rush. Rushing would require caring about time, and time was a resource he had in abundance. The signal grew stronger as he walked, more complex, more layered, the emotions behind it becoming clearer. Pain, real pain, not the philosophical kind that Nagato liked to preach about. The actual physical, bone-deep pain of a body that had been destroyed by its own power, and a mind that had been twisted by its own grief until the original shape was unrecognizable. He found the paper tree on a hilltop. A massive structure of folded paper, shaped like a tree, a hiding place built by the woman who stood in front of it, with her wings of paper spread and her eyes cold and determined. Conan. She looked at Naruto, at the barefoot boy with frost on his skin and snowflakes in his hair, at the eyes that were open, fully open, both of them, no lazy droop, no pretense of sleepiness. "You're here for Nagato," she said. "I'm here to see him. I won't let you. I'm not going to hurt him." Naruto's voice was quiet, the same quiet he used for everything, but there was something in it now that hadn't been there during the fight. Something almost gentle. "I just want to talk." Conan studied him. Her paper wings rustled, the wind blew, snow, the ambient exhalation of his presence drifted between them. She stepped aside. Inside the paper tree in the mechanical chair, Nagato waited. And when Naruto saw him, really saw him, not the paths, not the power, not the philosophy, but the man himself, he stopped walking and stood in the doorway and looked for a long time. Nagato was destroyed. There was no gentler word for it. The Rinnegan had eaten his body like fire eats paper, consuming his physical form to fuel its impossible power, leaving behind a thing that was more skeleton than man. His limbs were wasted. His skin was gray. The metal rods in his back, the receivers, the connections to the paths, protruded like the spines of a dying porcupine. He sat in his chair and breathed in shallow, rattling gasps, and his ringed eyes, purple, concentric, the legendary eyes of the Sage of Six Paths, stared at Naruto with a fury that was 9/10 exhaustion. "The ice demon," Nagato said. His voice was a rasp, a whisper that had to fight for every syllable. "I felt the cold from here. You froze my paths. All six, they were my will, my pain, my justice." Naruto looked at the ruined man, at the rods, at the eyes, at the body that had been sacrificed on the altar of a philosophy that started with grief and ended with genocide. "You're tired," Naruto said. Nagato's ringed eyes widened, barely, a fraction of a millimeter. But Naruto saw it, and in that tiny widening was the entire truth of Nagato's existence. The boy from the rain country, who had watched his parents die, who had found a dream and lost it, who had built a religion around his suffering, because the alternative was admitting that suffering was pointless, that there was no grand lesson in dead friends and broken bodies, that sometimes the world was just cruel and there was nothing you could do about it except keep moving or stop. "I can see that," Naruto continued. "The tiredness, it's in everything you do. The philosophy, the paths, the big speech about pain and understanding. That's not conviction. That's someone who's been running on empty for so long that they've forgotten what full felt like. You know nothing of, I know tired." Naruto walked closer. His bare feet left frost prints on the paper floor. "I know it better than anyone you've ever met. I know the kind of tired that doesn't go away with sleep, the kind that lives in your bones, the kind that makes you look at the world and think, why bother?" He stood in front of Nagato's chair, close enough to touch, close enough that the cold rolling off his body made Nagato's breath visible. "But you took your tired and turned it into this, burning villages, killing people, making the world feel what you feel." Naruto shook his head, slowly. "That's not justice. That's not even revenge. That's just a really exhausting way to ask for help." Nagato's face crumbled, not physically, emotionally. The mask of divine pain, the facade of a god who had suffered and therefore had the right to make others suffer, it cracked. And behind it was a man, a very tired, very broken, very old man in a young man's ruined body, and the ringed eyes that could destroy the world were filling with tears. "You don't understand," Nagato whispered. "Yahiko died, and it hurts, and nothing you've done has made it hurt less." Naruto's voice was the quietest it had been since this entire day started. "I know. Trust me. I know." He placed his hand on Nagato's chest, over the heart, where the last heat in that ruined body still flickered. "Ice time." The ice spread gently, not the violent, instantaneous flash freeze he used in combat. This was slow, deliberate, a cooling that started at Nagato's core and worked outward, easing the pain first, the constant, screaming pain of a body pushed beyond every possible limit, and then the movement, and then the awareness, and then the last tired thought before stasis took hold. Nagato's eyes closed. The tension in his face, the tension that had been there for 20 years, since the first death, since the first loss, since the world had started hitting him and never stopped, released. His expression smoothed, settled, became, for the first time in decades, peaceful. He was preserved, not dead, frozen in stasis, every cell suspended, every process paused. The decision about what to do with him, heal him, free him, punish him, forgive him, that was for someone else. Naruto was not the judge of that. He was just the one who stopped the pain. Konan watched from the doorway. Her paper wings had folded. Her cold eyes were wet. "What happens to him now?" she asked. "Someone else decides that." Naruto withdrew his hand. "I just put him to sleep. He was in pain. I know. For 20 years. I know." Konan looked at the frozen Nagato, at the peace on his face, at the ice that covered him like a blanket of crystal. "Thank you," she said. Naruto walked past her, out of the paper tree, into the snow. He stopped on the hilltop and looked back toward Konoha, visible in the distance, half of it white with ice, the other half smoking from the paths of salt. A village that was broken and frozen and alive. He started walking back. The reactions when they came were everything. Tsunade stood at the gates when he returned, arms crossed, face unreadable. She looked at the barefoot boy walking out of the frozen forest, snowflakes in his hair, frost on his bare skin, no coat, no shoes, no visible concern. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "Report." She managed. 6 paths neutralized, all frozen. The real one is on a hilltop northeast about 4 clicks out, also frozen. There's a woman with paper wings guarding him. She's not hostile. "Casualties? Mine? The villages." Naruto's jaw tightened, just for a second. "Some. From before I got there. The paths hit the east side first." Tsunade's hands gripped her biceps, her nails dug into her skin. People had died. People she was supposed to protect. Because a god had come to her village and her village's greatest weapon had been asleep on a rock, Naruto saw it. Read the guilt through observation haki. Felt the way it twisted inside her. "It's not your fault," he said, "or mine. It's the fault of the people who did it. That's not how it works. It's how it should work." He walked past her into the village. "I'm going to find a coat." Kakashi was waiting at the intersection, leaning against a frozen lamppost. Book in hand, though the pages were too frosted to read. His Sharingan was still exposed, still recording, the habit of a man who had learned that the most important moments were the ones you didn't expect. He looked at Naruto, at the frost, at the barefoot walk of a boy who had just single-handedly ended an invasion by a self-proclaimed god. "Yo," Kakashi said. "Yo, you missed the first few minutes. I was asleep, I know." Naruto walked on. Kakashi fell into step beside him. They walked through the frozen half of the village together, past the civilians who were emerging from shelters and staring at the ice, past the shinobi who were gathering near the frozen paths and poking at the ice experimentally, past the children who had never seen snow and were already building snowmen from the accumulation on the ground. A woman standing in the doorway of a shop, the kind of woman who had, years ago, been the kind of person who threw things at the demon brat, watched Naruto walk by. She watched him with her hand over her mouth. Then she lowered her hand and said, very quietly, "Thank you." Naruto didn't hear it, or maybe he did, and chose not to acknowledge it. His observation haki heard everything, but some things were better left unresponded to, because responding would require feeling something about it, and feelings were exhausting. The ice thawed over the next 3 days, naturally, gradually. Naruto let it melt at its own pace, the ambient temperature of the village slowly climbing back to normal as his influence receded and summer reasserted itself. The paths, defrosted by specialized teams, were examined and studied and ultimately disposed of. Nagato was transported to Konoha under guard. Conan came with him. What happened to them after that was Tsunade's business, and Tsunade handled it with the combination of pragmatism and reluctant compassion that made her, for all her flaws, a very good Hokage. The village rebuilt. Again. Because that was what Konoha did. It broke and it rebuilt, and it broke and it rebuilt. And each time the cracks were a little wider and the repairs were a little more desperate. And each time the thing that held it together was not the buildings or the walls, but the people inside them. Stubborn and alive and unwilling to stop. Naruto found a new coat, darker than the old one, higher collar. He considered briefly having something embroidered on the back, a word, a kanji. He decided against it. The word he wanted wasn't one this world would understand, and the word this world would give him wasn't one he'd earned yet. He sat on the Hokage monument and watched the village rebuild and said nothing, and the snow that fell around him was softer than usual, gentler, as if even the cold understood that the village had been through enough. The 5 Kage summit happened 2 months later because the political machinery of the ninja world did not pause for invasions or ice ages or the existential crises of anyone involved. The Raikage called it. All 5 Kage, their guards, their advisors, gathered in the land of iron, a neutral country, a samurai nation, a place of swords and honor and cold. The cold, at least, Naruto was comfortable with. He was not supposed to be at the summit. He was not a Kage. He was not an advisor. He was not, technically, anything except a teenager with too much power and not enough interest in using it. But Tsunade had pulled him aside before departing and said, "Come with me." And Naruto had said, "Why?" And Tsunade had said, "Because the Raikage wants to declare war on Akatsuki, and the Chuchikage wants to argue about everything, and Gaara will be there, and you're the only thing in the world that scares all of them equally." "I'm not scary. You froze half my village in 4 seconds. That was to help. They don't know that." So Naruto went. He rode his bicycle through the snow, the real snow, Iron Country's natural snow, which was warmer than his, and arrived at the summit building 40 minutes after the proceedings started because the road had been pleasant and there had been a very good napping spot along the way. He found a bench outside the building, lay down, fell asleep. Inside, the summit was proceeding exactly as predicted. The Raikage, the 4th, a man built like a thunderstorm and twice as subtle, was slamming the table. The Tsuchikage, Onoki, ancient, small, flying, was complaining about everything. Mei Terumi, the 5th Mizukage, was threatening to melt people who disagreed with her. Gaara, the 5th Kazekage, youngest Kage in history, was the only one speaking calmly. And his calm was the calm of someone who had been frozen by Naruto Uzumaki and had emerged from the experience with a fundamentally altered perspective on conflict resolution. The summit erupted into chaos when Sasuke appeared. He shouldn't have been there. He was supposed to be in Konoha under supervision. But Sasuke was Sasuke, and supervision was a concept he applied to other people. And the intelligence he'd gathered about Itachi's death and the truth behind the Uchiha massacre had driven him to a place where the rules of his village were less important than the questions burning in his chest. He came through the ceiling, literally, a Chidori-enhanced entry that shattered the skylight and scattered the Kage's guards. His Sharingan was active, Mangekyo now. The pattern evolved, the power grown. He was after Danzo. Danzo, who was sitting in the Konoha advisor's seat, who had Shisui's eye hidden under his bandages, who had engineered the Uchiha massacre and never lost a night of sleep over it. The room devolved. Guards engaged, the Raikage charged, lightning armor blazing. Sasuke fought back. Explosions lightning, the Susanoo manifesting, ribcage first, then skeletal arm, the purple spectral warrior forming around Sasuke like armor made of hatred. And then Madara arrived. Not Madara, Tobi, Obito, the masked man who called himself Madara because the real one was dead and the name still carried weight. But the power was real, and the Rinnegan was real, and the declaration he made, the Eye of the Moon plan, the infinite Tsukuyomi, the enslavement of the entire world through a genjutsu cast on the moon itself, was real. He appeared in the center of the room, swirling into existence through Kamui, the space-time jutsu that made him intangible, the technique that let him exist between dimensions. one orange mask, one Sharingan eye visible through the hole, a voice that carried the weight of decades of manipulation. "I am Madara Uchiha," the masked man declared. "And I am here to declare the fourth great ninja war." The room went still. 5 Kaj, their guards, their advisors, all of them processing the implications of what had just been said. Then the temperature dropped, 15 degrees. In an instant, the breath of every person in the room became visible. Frost crept across the conference table. The windows, already frosted from the Iron Country winter, frosted deeper, the glass cracking under the thermal stress. Naruto walked through the door. He'd woken up, not because of the explosions. He'd slept through those. Because his observation haki had flagged something specific, a chakra signature entering the building that carried a weight of intent so heavy, so vast, so fundamentally wrong that it cut through sleep the way a knife cuts through paper. The signature of someone who planned to end the world. He walked in with his hands in his pockets, sleep mask on his forehead, the new coat, dark, high-collared, trailing behind him. Snowflakes drifted from his shoulders despite being indoors. He looked at the room, at the destruction, at Sasuke encased in Susanoo, at Danzo clutching his arm, at the 5 Kage, each in various states of combat readiness, at the masked man standing in the center, one Sharingan spinning behind the orange mask. Arara. Naruto's gaze settled on the masked figure. "You're really old to be doing this." The masked man, Obito, wearing Madara's name like a costume, turned to face him. The single visible Sharingans, the mask tilted. Naruto Uzumaki, the Nine-Tails Jinchuriki. That's what the bingo book says. Your reputation precedes you. I'd rather it didn't. Reputations are exhausting. The Raikaji was on his feet. Lightning crackled around his body. "Who the hell are you?" "He's with me," Tsunade said from her seat. Her voice was very controlled. "The kid who froze the 6 paths of pain?" Onoki squinted. "He's shorter than I expected. I'm 6 feet tall. Like I said, short." The masked man raised his hand. "Enough. The war will proceed regardless of, not visibly. Not with a body flicker or a substitution or any technique that the assembled Kage, each one a master of combat, each one the most powerful person in their respective village, could track with their eyes or their senses." One moment Naruto was by the door. The next he was in front of the masked man. One hand raised, palm extended, ice clamp. Ice erupted from his palm and clamped around the masked man's right arm. Not a freeze, not a full body encasement, but a targeted restraint. A vice of absolute zero ice locking around the forearm and wrist, immobilizing the hand, preventing the seals or gestures that most jutsu required. The masked man's Kamui activated. The arm phased, should have slipped through the ice like it slipped through everything. The space-time technique that made him untouchable. The arm stayed. The ice was not in one dimension. The cold, absolute zero, the cessation of all molecular motion, affected matter at a level that transcended the spatial manipulation Kamui employed. The molecules of the masked man's arm were frozen in place. They could not move. Movement was what Kamui used to shift matter between dimensions. Without movement, without the vibration of particles, without the thermal energy that allowed atoms to transition, Kamui failed. For the first time in his entire career as a shadow manipulator, Obito Uchiha could not phase through something. His visible eye went wide. Naruto's other hand came up. Both arms turned black. Armament haki, the full visible hardening, spreading from fists to forearms to elbows, the absolute blackness of a defense that existed outside the rules of this world. The masked man used his free hand. Kamui on the other side, trying to warp away, trying to create the dimensional spiral that would suck him to safety. Naruto's haki-coated fist hit the mask. The mask cracked. A single fissure, running from the eye hole to the chin, the orange surface splitting under a blow that carried the combined force of armament haki and absolute zero ice. The impact sent the masked man sliding back. Naruto had released the ice clamp at the moment of the punch to avoid anchoring his target in place and reducing the kinetic transfer. The masked man stumbled, caught himself. His hand went to the cracked mask. Behind the fissure, a second eye was visible. Not a Sharingan, a Rinnegan, purple, ringed, taken from a dead god and implanted in a stolen socket. "Interesting," the masked man said. His voice had changed, less theatrical, more genuine. The voice of someone who had been playing a role and had just been reminded that the stage was real. You bypassed Kamui. Your trick needs movement to work. I stopped movement. Naruto lowered his fists. The haki didn't recede. It's not complicated. Everything about you is complicated. The masked man's Kamui spiraled again, this time faster, more desperate, pulling his body into the dimensional gap before Naruto could touch him again. He was leaving, retreating. The war will happen, the masked man said as his body dissolved into the spiral. With or without your ice, the world will learn. The world is tired of learning. Naruto's voice carried even as the masked man faded. It wants a nap. The spiral closed. The masked man was gone. Sasuke Susanoo dissipated. Danzo was already gone, fled in the chaos, the old Warhawk's survival instinct overriding his political maneuvering. The summit room was silent. 5 Kage, their guards, a frozen conference table, a cracked skylight, and a teenager standing in the middle of it all with black arms and snowflakes in his hair. The Raikage spoke first. What the hell was that? Armament haki, Naruto said, as if naming a type of sandwich. What is armament haki? Hard to explain, harder to block. He bypassed Kamui, Gaara said quietly. The young Kazekage was standing at his seat, hands clasped, face calm. But his eyes, the eyes of a boy who had been frozen by this same person years ago, who had sat on a frozen monument of his own tailed beast and listened to a lazy voice tell him to figure out what he wanted. His eyes were alight with something. Not surprise. Recognition. He stopped a space-time jutsu with physical force. Not force, Naruto corrected. Temperature. That's the same thing at the molecular level, Onoki grumbled. Then he caught himself. Wait, how does a genin know about molecular? I read. Mei Terumi leaned forward. Her eyes were evaluating. You're from Konoha? When I'm awake. What rank? Genin. 5 Kage, 5 reactions. A's face went through confusion and into something that looked like it hurt. Onoki's ancient face crumpled with the effort of processing. Mei smiled, and her smile was the kind that could level a village. Gaara's expression didn't change, but his sand shifted in its gourd, restlessly, almost affectionately, as if remembering the ice. Tsunade buried her face in her hand. He's been a genin for 3 years, Tsunade said through her fingers. I've been trying to promote him. He won't fill out the paperwork. Paperwork is exhausting. Naruto said, the 4th Great Ninja War began 6 weeks later. The allied shinobi forces, every hidden village, every nation, every ninja who could hold a kunai, mobilized against Akatsuki's army. White Zetsu clones numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Reanimated legends walked the earth, summoned from death by the Edo Tensei, forced to fight against the living world they once protected. And above it all, behind it all, the shadow of the Ten Tails, the primordial beast, the combination of all Biju, the thing that would power the infinite Tsukuyomi, loomed. Naruto arrived at the battlefield on the 2nd day. He'd been held in reserve by the Allied command, not because they doubted his usefulness, but because deploying him too early risked alerting the enemy to his position. And the element of surprise was the only tactical advantage they could claim against an army of that size. He arrived at the main front at 3:47 p.m., riding his bicycle along a supply route, and he crested a hill and looked down at the battlefield and stopped pedaling. The scale was beyond anything he had seen in this life. Tens of thousands of white Zetsu, white, featureless, endless, swarming across a plain that stretched to the horizon. Allied shinobi forces holding a defensive line, jutsu flying, explosions detonating, the screams and chaos of open warfare turning the landscape into a hellscape of dust and fire and death. Reanimated shinobi, legends, S-rank monsters from the history books, fought against the living with the terrible efficiency of the undead, unable to die, unable to stop, puppeted by a jutsu that didn't care about their suffering. Naruto looked at it, all of it. The observation haki painted the entire battlefield in his mind. Every combatant, every jutsu, every death happening in real time, felt across the full breadth of his sensory range. He got off the bicycle, leaned it against a rock, then he walked down the hill, toward the battle, away from the safety of the supply line, into the noise and the fire and the death. The ground frosted under his feet. The air cooled around him. Snow began to fall, just in his immediate area, a localized winter following him like an entourage. A wave of white Zetsu saw him, 100 of them, 200. They turned from the main engagement and charged, mindless, relentless, the cannon fodder of an army that didn't value individual lives. Because individual lives weren't the point, Naruto raised one hand. Ice time capsule. The cold erupted outward in a targeted cone, not the omnidirectional ice age, but a focused blast of absolute zero freezing that swept across the charging Zetsu like a searchlight made of winter. The first rank froze mid-stride. The second rank froze mid-leap. The third, fourth, fifth, dozens, scores 100. White Zetsu caught in a single release, a field of frozen statues stretching across the plain, each one a perfect crystal replica of a mindless clone captured in its last moment of motion. The allied shinobi on the defensive line saw it. They saw the wave of white Zetsu charging toward a lone figure on a hill. They saw the figure raise a hand. They saw the wave stop, freeze, become a sculpture garden. The line held, not because of tactics or willpower or the desperate courage of people fighting for their lives, because a teenager had walked onto the battlefield and frozen 100 enemies with a gesture. And the sight of it, the sheer, unbelievable, reality-breaking sight of it, gave them something they hadn't had in 2 days of fighting: hope. Naruto walked through the frozen Zetsu field, past the statues, past the horror, onto the main plain. More Zetsu, always more. They came in waves, 500, 1,000, an endless tide of white pouring across the landscape like water through a broken dam. Naruto stopped walking. He placed his hand flat on the ground. Ice Age. The plain froze, not a section, not a quadrant. The entire visible plain, a stretch of land 2 miles wide and 3 miles deep, the full breadth of the main battlefield, flash froze in a single cataclysmic instant. The ground became glacial ice. The dust in the air became snow. The white Zetsu, every single one on that plain, thousands of them, an army, froze where they stood, where they ran, where they fought. The jutsu in the air, fire techniques, wind techniques, water techniques from both sides, crystallized. A fireball mid-flight became a sphere of frozen flame, beautiful and impossible, hovering in the air for a split second before the ice claimed it and it dropped. The allied shinobi were untouched. As in Konoha, Naruto's ice was precise when it mattered. It froze the enemy. It froze the terrain. It did not freeze the allies. The line of shinobi stood at the edge of a frozen wasteland, their boots on the border between normal ground and glacial ice, staring at what one person had done to a battlefield. The silence lasted 4 seconds. Then someone, a chunin from the hidden cloud, name unknown, insignificant in every way except this, whispered, "What the hell is he?" Gaara, commanding the 4th Division, stood on a platform of sand and watched the plane turn white. His face was absolutely still. His sand was absolutely still. Everything about the 5th Kazekage was absolutely still, because he had been frozen by this same power years ago, and the sight of it deployed at this scale was simultaneously the most terrifying and the most comforting thing he had ever witnessed. "He's an ally," Gaara said quietly. And that was enough. Killer B, the 8 Tails Jinchuriki, the rapper, the man who turned every battle into a performance, was mid-verse when the freeze hit. He was fighting a cluster of Zetsu near the western flank, rhyming and slashing and being B, and then the world turned white, and the Zetsu around him were ice sculptures, and his verse died in his throat. "Yo, 8-0, B said to the beast inside him. "Tell me you felt that." "I felt it," the 8 Tails rumbled. "That is not chakra, that is something else. Ice cold, baby. Literally, ya fool." The Raikage, A, leading from the front because the Raikage didn't lead from anywhere else, had lightning armor active when the freeze wave passed him. The lightning sputtered, sparked. The cold didn't touch him. Naruto's precision, again, but the ambient temperature made his technique less efficient. The ionization of the air disrupted by the sudden thermal collapse. He stared at the frozen plain, at the thousands of frozen enemies, at the single figure walking through them, hands in pockets, leaving frost prints on ice. "Tsunade," a growl through the communication link. "Your Genin just froze the entire main front." "I'm aware. The entire main front. I heard you the first time. He's a Genin?" Tsunade's silence was its own answer. The reanimated Kage came next. The Edo Tensei, Kabuto's masterwork, the stolen forbidden jutsu that forced the dead to fight the living, had resurrected legends. Among them, the previous Kage, each one a titan, each one fighting against their will with the full power of their living selves. The first Hokage, Hashirama Senju, the god of shinobi, the man who had tamed the tailed beasts and built a village from nothing, was among them. His wood release was active, massive trees erupting from the ground, an entire forest materializing on the battlefield as the most powerful jutsu user in history was forced by the reanimation to fight against the world he had created. Naruto walked toward him. Hashirama's reanimated eyes, trapped, conscious, horrified at what his body was doing, focused on the approaching boy. His wood release lashed out, not by choice, by compulsion. Massive branches sweeping toward Naruto like the arms of a god. Naruto breathed on his hand, a single, slow exhale. The moisture froze, crystallized, formed a blade of ice in his grip, long, curved, impossibly sharp, the edge honed to a molecular thinness by absolute zero, ice saber. The blade hummed in the frozen air. Naruto held it loosely, one-handed, the way a man holds an umbrella, not as a weapon, but as an extension of himself, a tool so familiar it didn't require thought. The wooden branches came at him. He cut them, not with effort, not with struggle. He cut them the way you'd prune a hedge. Lazy, efficient, each swing severing a branch the size of a building, the ice saber's edge freezing the wood on contact and shattering it into frozen splinters. The cut surfaces turned white. The living wood died where the cold touched it, cellular water expanding, membranes rupturing, a forest's worth of destruction in every swing. Hashirama watched from inside his reanimated body. Watched this boy, this teenager with a sword of ice and eyes like winter, cut through his wood release like it was paper. And the first Hokage, the man who had defeated Madara Uchiha, who had captured the Nine Tails, who had been the strongest ninja of his era, smiled, not because he was happy about being cut through, because he recognized something in the way the boy moved, the efficiency, the calm, the complete absence of wasted energy. "You're not from here, are you?" Hashirama said. His voice was warm despite the reanimation, despite the compulsion, despite the horror of being puppeted. "Your power, it's not from this world." Naruto's ice saber cut through the last branch. He stood in a field of frozen wood fragments, looking at the first Hokage. "No," Naruto said, "it's not. Then wherever you're from, they made something remarkable." Naruto's mouth twitched. Not a smile, the memory of a smile. They made something tired. The Edo Tensei pulled Hashirama away. More battles, more fronts, more horror. But the first Hokage carried that moment with him through the rest of the war. Like the sight of a boy with a sword of ice standing in the ruins of his forest, and the understanding that the future was in hands that could freeze the world and chose instead to merely protect it. The 10 Tails arrived on the third day. It was not a subtle arrival. The earth shook, the sky darkened, a pillar of chakra, visible, physical, a column of energy that connected the ground to the clouds, erupted from the battlefield's center. The white Zetsu army parted, the reanimated Kaj were recalled. The stage was cleared for the entrance of something that made armies and legends and Kage and gods look like footnotes. The 10 Tails, Jubi, rose from the earth like a nightmare deciding to become real. It was not one shape. It was every shape. A mass of tails and mouths and eyes, shifting, growing, howling with a voice that was every tailed beast screaming simultaneously. Its body was the size of a mountain range. Its tails, 10 of them, each one capable of leveling a city, swept across the landscape and created canyons where they struck. The allied shinobi forces fell back, not in retreat, in survival. The scale of the 10 Tails was beyond engagement, beyond strategy, beyond the combined power of every ninja on the field. This was not a fight. It was a natural disaster with malice. A Biju bomb formed in the 10 Tails' mouth. A sphere of compressed chakra, not the size of a house, not the size of a building, the size of a stadium, pulsing with enough destructive energy to erase a country. The beast aimed it at the Allied forces' main position. 10,000 shinobi, every medic, every commander, every person who was supposed to survive this war and go home to their families. Ice ball. The technique came from nowhere, from everywhere. A sphere of absolute zero ice, enormous, 30 feet across, dense beyond measurement, materialized in the air between the Biju bomb and the Allied position. It hung there for a fraction of a second, rotating slowly, the surface of it so cold that the air around it turned solid and fell as snow. Then it met the Biju bomb. The collision happened in a space between moments. The two forces, destruction incarnate and cold incarnate, met at a point above the battlefield, and the result was not an explosion. It was a negation. The Biju bomb's energy, heat, chakra, kinetic force, hit absolute zero and was absorbed, converted. Transformed from destruction into temperature, from energy into the absence of energy, from fire into ice, a blizzard erupted from the collision point, not a metaphorical blizzard, a genuine, atmospheric, 3-hour blizzard that blanketed the battlefield in snow and reduced visibility to zero and drove the temperature down to levels that had never been recorded in the land of fire. The Biju bomb was gone. The ice ball was gone. In their place, winter. A winter that settled over the battlefield like a blanket and didn't leave for the rest of the day. The allied shinobi huddled in the blizzard and lived. The 10 tails howled into the white and couldn't see its targets. And somewhere in the snow, walking toward the beast that everyone else was running from, was a figure that the observation posts could only track by the temperature readings on their instruments, a moving point of absolute zero, advancing steadily through the storm it had created. Every commander watching from the rear lines saw the readout. Every cage received the report. "He's walking toward it," said the sensor relaying Naruto's position to the Reincarnation. "I can see that," A replied. His voice was hoarse. "Should we provide support?" A looked at the readout, at the temperature data, at the dot representing a 16-year-old boy walking alone toward a primordial god. "No," the Reincarnation said. "We'd just be in the way." Gaara, receiving the same data at his command post, said nothing. He watched the dot move on the sensor map, steady, unhurried, the pace of someone walking to work, not walking toward the apocalypse. He remembered the ice around his sand. The voice above him saying, "Figure out what you actually want." The falling snow. "He'll be fine," Gaara said to no one in particular, and believed it. Naruto walked through the blizzard. The 10 tails was a shadow in the white, massive, shifting, its roars creating shockwaves that blew the snow sideways. He felt it through observation haki. Every tail, every mouth, every eye. The pain inside it, because the 10 tails was in pain. The combination of 9 beings forced into one shape that none of them wanted, a chorus of agony wearing the body of a god. He stopped 300 meters from the beast, close enough that its tails swept the ground around him, cratering the frozen earth. One tail came at him, a direct hit, aimed or coincidental, it didn't matter. The tail passed through his body, ice scattered, reformed. His Logia intangibility handled the impact the way it handled every impact, by not being there for it, and then being there again after. He cracked his neck, pushed his sleep mask up from his forehead and tucked it into his coat, rolled his shoulders. For the first time in the entire story, in either of his lives, he stood up straight. Ice Age. Full output, not a battlefield, not a plain, not a village or a valley or a lake, an entire region. The ice erupted from his position and raced outward at a speed that defied the laws of thermodynamics. Ground freezing, air freezing, the blizzard he'd created freezing further into a solid canopy of ice overhead, the sky itself becoming a ceiling of crystal. The ground for miles in every direction shattered and reformed as glacial ice, deep ice, layered ice, the kind of ice that existed at the bottom of oceans and the tops of mountains and had no business existing on a battlefield in a temperate country. The 10 tails roared. The roar produced shockwaves that cracked the ice. The ice reformed, cracked again, reformed again. A battle between the most destructive force the ninja world had ever produced and the coldest substance in existence, fought not in seconds but in microseconds, each crack and reform happening faster than the eye could track, the landscape beneath them flickering between destruction and ice, like a strobe light made of geology. The 10 tails froze. Not all of them, 3, then 4. The ice climbed them like vines, locking the massive appendages in place, anchoring them to the frozen ground. The beast thrashed, tore free. The ice reformed and climbed again, tore free again, reformed, climbed. Naruto was not unmoved. This was the first time his ice had to work this hard. The 10 tails chakra, ancient, primordial, the combined energy of all 9 Biju and the husk of a dead god, burned hot enough to resist absolute zero. Not overcome it, not melt it, but resist it, which was more than anything in the world had ever managed. His breath came harder, his jaw set. The armament haki spread, not just his arms this time, both arms, both legs, his torso, his neck. The full body hardening, the absolute blackness coating his skin like iron dipped in the void, layered with ice. The two forces combining into a state of being that was less person and more the physical manifestation of the concept of unyielding. He walked forward, through the shockwaves, through the tails, through the mouth that opened, one of the 10 tails' many mouths, and blasted a focused beam of raw chakra at him that would have vaporized a mountain. The beam hit him. The haki held. The ice on top of the haki absorbed the heat. He walked through the beam like a man walking through rain, and he came out the other side smoking and frosted and alive. In the mindscape, Kurama watched. The fox had been frozen for nearly a decade now. Its body was ice from tail to neck, immobile, imprisoned. The most powerful tailed beast reduced to a spectator in a frozen theater. But its eyes, those burning, ancient, impossibly old eyes, watched through the seal's connection as its Jinchuriki walked alone toward the 10 tails. Kurama had opinions about this. Many opinions. Opinions it had been accumulating for years, frozen in ice, unable to express, building up like pressure in a sealed container. "You don't use my power," Kurama said. Its voice was quiet, not because it chose to be quiet, because the ice around its throat didn't allow volume. Naruto, walking, didn't respond. "You've never used my power. Not once. Not against the Sannin. Not against pain. Not against the swordsman. Not against any of them." No response. "You walk toward the 10 tails, the thing I was part of, the thing that will devour this world, and you don't ask for my help." No response. Why? Naruto's stride didn't break, his eyes didn't close, but inside the mindscape in the frozen cavern, his mental projection appeared for just a moment. A flicker, a ghost of the lawn chair boy from years ago, now taller, now older, now wearing a dark coat instead of an orange jacket. "Because this is my job," Naruto said, "not yours." "Your job? I am the nine-tailed fox. I am destruction incarnate. I am..." Frozen. Kurama's mouth snapped shut. "You're frozen," Naruto repeated. "In ice, in my mindscape, and you've been frozen for almost 10 years, and you're still here, still screaming, still furious. A beat, still watching." Kurama said nothing. "You could have stopped watching years ago, could have shut your eyes, could have retreated into yourself and slept. But you didn't. You watched everything, every fight, every moment. You watched. I was bored. You were invested. The silence in the mindscape was thick enough to freeze, which it was, technically, already. "I don't need your power," Naruto said. "I never did, but I wouldn't mind your company." Kurama's eyes, ancient, burning, the eyes of a creature that had seen the birth of the ninja world and had hated every moment of it, blinked. Once, slowly. "You are the strangest human who has ever lived." "Second strangest. There was a rubber one once, long story." Kurama's mouth twitched. It might have been a snarl. It might have been something else. The ice around the fox's body didn't thaw, but it cracked, just a little. Hairline fractures along the surface, barely visible. The first imperfections in a decade of perfect frozen imprisonment. Neither of them mentioned it. On the battlefield, Naruto reached the base of the 10 tails. The beast towered above him, a living mountain, still thrashing, still fighting the ice that climbed its body and was repeatedly shaken off. Obito and Madara, the real Madara, reanimated, resurrected, standing atop the beast like captains on a ship, looked down at the boy below. Madara Uchiha, the legendary, the rival of Hashirama, the ghost that haunted the ninja world for a century. He stood on the 10 tails head with his arms crossed, Rinnegan blazing in both eyes, the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan burning underneath, his reanimated body radiating a chakra so dense it was visible. A purple aura that distorted the air around him. He looked down at Naruto. "So this is the ice demon," Madara said. Naruto looked up at him. The sleep mask was off. The coat was frosted. The armament haki was full body, the absolute blackness covering his skin from fingers to toes, layered with ice that cracked and reformed continuously under the ambient chakra pressure of the 10 tails. "I've heard that name before," Naruto said. "It's still not enough to make me stand up straight." He was slouching, even now. Even here, at the base of a primordial god, facing the greatest warrior in the history of the ninja world, Naruto Uzumaki was slouching. Madara stared at him. Then, for the first time in decades, for the first time since he had fought Hashirama at the Valley of the End, For the first time since the world had shown him something genuinely interesting, Madara smiled. "Come then," Madara said. "Show me what ice can do against fire." Madara's Susanoo manifested, not the skeletal version, not the armored version, the perfect version. A towering spectral warrior, 100 feet tall, blue-white, wielding twin blades of ethereal energy, its face a demon's mask of power and rage. The stabilized Susanoo, the final form, the technique that only the most powerful Uchiha in history could maintain, wrapped around Madara like armor made of the concept of victory. Naruto's hands came together. The ice in the air, the ambient frost, the snow, the frozen moisture from the blizzard responded. It pulled toward him from every direction, condensing, compressing, forming shapes. Not a bird this time, not a pheasant, something larger. Two somethings. Ice fists. Massive constructs of absolute zero ice, each one 30 feet across, each one coated in a layer of armament haki so dense that the black surface seemed to absorb the light around it. They hovered at Naruto's sides like the hands of an invisible giant, connected to his own arms by chains of frozen chakra, moving as he moved, striking as he struck. Madara's Susanoo swung. The ethereal blade came down like a falling building. Naruto's ice fist met it. The collision split the sky. Not metaphorically, the air cracked. A visible fissure in the atmosphere, the thermal differential between Susanoo's chakra and absolute zero ice creating a pressure differential so extreme that the air itself fractured. The ground beneath them, already frozen, shattered into a crater 50 feet deep. The shockwave flattened everything in a quarter-mile radius. Frozen Zetsu, ice pillars, rubble, all of it pulverized. The Susanoo's blade held. The ice fist held. Neither gave. Madara's smile widened. "Magnificent," he breathed. "You are magnificent." Naruto's second ice fist came from the side, a haymaker aimed at the Susanoo's ribcage. The spectral warrior shifted, fast, impossibly fast for something that size, and caught the fist on its forearm. The impact cratered the Susanoo's armored surface. Cracks spread across the spectral form. Ice formed in the cracks, absolute zero exploiting every weakness, every fissure. The Susanoo shattered its own arm to free itself, regenerated the limb in a second from Madara's chakra, and counterattacked. Both blades. A cross-slash aimed at bisecting Naruto vertically and horizontally simultaneously. Naruto's ice constructs intercepted both blades. The four forces met at a central point, and the explosion, cold and chakra and force and fury, sent both combatants flying in opposite directions. Madara's Susanoo skidded across the frozen plain. Naruto's ice fists disintegrated into powder. Naruto reformed from the shrapnel of his own constructs. Ice reformation. His body had been partially dispersed by the blast, and the pieces pulled back together. Logia reconstitution at its fastest, his physical form rebuilding itself from ice particles. While he was still in motion, he landed, slid, dug his hockey-coated fingers into the frozen ground and stopped himself with a screech of black on ice. Madara was already moving. Hands forming seals. Tengai Shinsei. The shadow fell before the meteor was visible. A darkening of the sky, a dimming of the light, the sunlight occluded by something too large to process. Naruto looked up. A meteor. A rock the size of a village, pulled from the sky by the Rinnegan's gravitational mastery, falling toward the battlefield with the inevitability of extinction. It filled the sky. It blocked the sun. The heat of atmospheric entry made it glow. It was the most beautiful and terrifying thing in the sky, and it was 3 seconds from impact. Naruto raised both hands toward the sky. Ice block pheasant beak. Not one bird. 2. Launched simultaneously from both palms. Twin ice raptors, each one the size of a building. Wings spread, beaks open, screaming with the sound of cracking glaciers. They rocketed upward toward the falling meteor, trailing absolute zero vapor, their forms so cold that the air behind them turned to snow, and the snow turned to ice, and the ice fell like diamonds. The birds hit the meteor. The explosion was not fire. It was not force. It was winter, delivered at the speed of a falling god. The ice detonated against the molten rock surface, and the cold penetrated, deep, instantly, the absolute zero reaching the meteor's core and freezing it from the inside out. The rock stopped glowing. The atmospheric fire died. The surface turned white. Cracks spread. Not from heat stress, but from cold contraction. The stone shrinking as its temperature dropped from thousands of degrees to absolute zero in under a second. The meteor shattered. not into dangerous fragments, not into flaming chunks that would devastate the battlefield below. It shattered into thousands of pieces of frozen rock that drifted downward like snowflakes. Enormous snowflakes, building-sized snowflakes, but frozen and slow and harmless. They landed across the plain with soft, ponderous thuds embedding in the ice, adding to the glacial landscape, transforming the battlefield into something that looked like the surface of a frozen planet. The Allied shinobi, watching from their positions, watched a meteor shower turn to snowfall by a boy standing on a glacier with his arms raised toward the sky. The Raikage sat down, not deliberately. His legs simply stopped working. He sat on a frozen rock and stared at the sky and the falling stone snowflakes and the boy and the Susanoo and everything. And for the first time in his life, the fourth Raikage, the fastest man alive, the strongest Kage of his generation, felt small. B, I said through the communication link, "Yeah, bro? I'm glad he's on our side. Word." Obito saw the meteor fail and made his move. The 10 tails, still thrashing, still partially frozen, opened its central eye, the massive, ringed eye that was the Rinnegan and the Sharingan and something older than both, and began to charge the definitive Biju bomb. Not the one from before. A real one. The total output of a primordial god, compressed into a sphere of annihilation that would erase the landscape and everything on it, and the concept of landscape itself. Madara retreated to the 10 tails head. He and Obito stood together, the real Madara and the pretender, the legend and the shadow, united in purpose if nothing else. "Become the Jinchuriki," Madara commanded Obito. "Absorb it, now." Obito placed his hand on the 10 tails. The absorption began, the beast's power flowing into its new host, the 10 tails shrinking, Obito transforming, his body turning white, his power increasing exponentially. Naruto watched. He was tired. Not the performative tiredness, not the "I'd rather be sleeping" tiredness that was his default state. Actual physical tiredness, the kind that came from deploying Ice Age at full continental scale, from creating constructs large enough to fight a Susanoo, from freezing a meteor in the sky. He was breathing hard. His haki flickered. The ice under his feet was thinner than usual. He watched Obito become the 10 tails Jinchuriki, watched the transformation, watched the power grow. Then he looked at Madara. Madara was watching too, but Madara's attention was divided. Between Obito's transformation and Naruto, between the plan and the obstacle, between the future he was building and the boy who kept freezing it. Naruto moved, fast, the kind of fast he'd been capable of his entire life and had never needed to use, because everything else was handled with a gesture and a yawn. Admiral Kuzan's speed, the speed of a man who had crossed oceans, who had fought emperors, who had walked battlefields where the ground split beneath God's feet. Not a body flicker, not a substitution. Pure, physical, observation haki-guided speed, his body turning to ice and reforming at the destination. A teleportation that wasn't teleportation but was, functionally identical. He appeared next to Madara, on the 10 tails head, close enough to touch. Ice time. His palm hit Madara's chest. The ice spread. Madara's Rinnegan flared, the gravitational push of Shinra Tensei firing point blank, trying to repel the ice, trying to blast Naruto away. The push hit ice and haki and was absorbed. The cold continued spreading. Down Madara's arms, down his legs, across the Susanoo, which tried to reform and was frozen mid-manifestation, a half-formed spectral warrior encased in crystal. Madara's face behind the spreading ice showed something Naruto hadn't seen there before. Not fear. Madara didn't fear, but respect. The acknowledgement of a force that was in this moment greater than his own. "This won't hold me," Madara said as the ice covered his mouth. "It'll hold you long enough," Naruto replied. The ice sealed over Madara's eyes. The last thing visible through the crystal was the Rinnegan, spinning, recording, already planning the escape. Naruto turned to Obito. The transformation was almost complete. The 10 tails' power was almost fully absorbed. Obito's body was white and alien and barely human, the sage of Six Paths power rewriting his cells in real time. Naruto walked toward him across the 10 tails' shrinking body. His haki was flickering. His ice was thin. He was running on the last reserves of a body that had given everything it had today. He stopped in front of Obito, looked at him, through him, observation. Haki reading the intent behind the godlike exterior and finding at the core the same thing he always found in people who pursued destruction. pain, loss. A dead girl named Rin, and a world that had taken her, and a boy who had decided the only reasonable response was to end the world so thoroughly that loss itself became impossible. "You're tired too," Naruto said. Obito's white face, alien, godlike, barely recognizable as the boy who had once been Kakashi's teammate, twisted. "Don't! Ice time!" Naruto's hand was on Obito's face before the Jinchuriki could react. Not because Naruto was faster. He wasn't, not anymore. Not against the Ten Tails Jinchuriki at full power, but because Obito hesitated. For one fraction of a second, at the touch of a hand on his face, human contact, warm despite the cold, the simple physical connection of one person reaching out to another, Obito hesitated, and hesitation was all Naruto needed. The ice spread. It was not gentle this time. It was not the careful preservation he'd used on Nagato or the combat freeze he'd used on Madara. This was everything. The last of his reserves, the bottom of the barrel, the absolute final output of a body that was ice and had been ice and would always be ice, poured into a single technique at maximum power. Obito froze. The Ten Tails power inside him froze. The chakra, all of it, the primordial energy of a god, hit absolute zero and stopped. Molecular motion ceased. Atomic vibration ceased. The most powerful being on the battlefield, the Jinchuriki of the Ten Tails, the would-be god of the new world, became a statue of ice standing on the corpse of a beast that was rapidly dissolving without a host. Naruto's hand fell from Obito's face. He swayed, caught himself. The armament haki receded, first from his torso, then his legs, then his arms, the black fading to skin, the last reserve spent. He stood on the dissolving remains of the Ten Tails, surrounded by ice and snow and the frozen forms of two men who had tried to end the world, and he was so tired that the word tired had stopped meaning anything. He was past tired, past exhaustion. He was in the territory where the body stops asking and starts telling, and what it was telling him was sleep. But there was one more thing. One more. Because the sealed never stayed sealed in this world. Because gods had a way of arriving just when you thought the job was done. Kaguya Otsutsuki emerged from the white. She didn't enter. She didn't arrive. She was simply there, present in a way that transcended physical location, existing in the space between dimensions, her white robes and white hair and white skin and the third eye on her forehead all manifesting simultaneously, as if the concept of appearance had decided to embody itself. The battlefield shifted. The ground, the ice, the frozen plain, the glacier Naruto had spent the day building, dissolved. Not melted, dissolved. The physical landscape was replaced by something else. A dimension. An endless white void of bone ash and frozen dust, stretching to infinity in every direction. The personal reality of a being who predated the ninja world by millennia. Naruto stood in the void, alone. Sasuke was somewhere behind him. He could feel the Uchiha's chakra through observation haki. Distant, still fighting, still alive. Sakura was further back. Kakashi further still. The others, the Alliance, the Kage, the army, were in the original dimension, separated by a barrier that Kaguya had erected like closing a door. Kaguya looked at him. She was beautiful in the way that glaciers are beautiful. Vast, cold, indifferent to the concept of human significance. Her Byakugan saw everything. Her Rinne's Sharingan, the third eye, the original eye, the source from which all dojutsu descended, saw more. She was the mother of chakra, the progenitor, the goddess. Naruto looked at her. She was the source of all of it. Every jutsu, every bloodline, every war fought over power that she had introduced to this world. A chain of violence stretching back millennia, all of it traced to this one being, this one moment of alien intervention in human history. He yawned. It was not disrespect. It was not bravado. It was a yawn, the genuine, uncontrollable, physiological response of a body that had been fighting all day and wanted to stop. Kaguya's expression, serene, divine, untouched by human emotion, shifted. The faintest crease between her brows. Not anger, not offense, confusion. She had devoured gods. She had ended civilizations. She had been sealed by her own children and had clawed her way back to existence across millennia. No one had ever yawned at her. "You are the vessel of the nine tails," Kaguya said. Right. Her voice was not a voice. It was a vibration that the air interpreted as sound, the fundamental frequency of a being that existed partially outside of physics. And you're the reason everyone in this world has problems. Naruto rolled his shoulders. cracked his neck, pushed the sleep mask, still on his forehead, always on his forehead, the one constant through wars and gods and frozen valleys, further up into his hair. Your power, Kaguya continued, as if he hadn't spoken, it is not of this world. Neither are you. I have consumed worlds. I have Ice Age. No warning, no build-up, no waiting for the monologue to finish. Naruto slammed his hand against the white void's surface. Whatever the surface was, whatever constituted ground in a dimension made of bone ash, and the cold erupted, it traveled across the void. The white ground turned whiter, if that was possible, as ice formed on a surface that shouldn't have been freezable. The bone ash dust crystallized. The air, such as it was, condensed into frost. The void, the infinite, featureless void of a goddess's personal dimension, began to freeze. Kaguya felt it. She felt it. The cold touched her dimension and she felt it, which meant it affected her, which meant it was real, which meant the absolute zero ice of a reincarnated admiral from another world could interact with the dimensional fabric of a primordial goddess. She waved her hand. The dimension shifted. The frozen section of the void was replaced by fresh void, a simple dimensional rotation, swapping the frozen area for an unfrozen one, the cosmic equivalent of turning a pillow to the cold side. But the ice had touched. It had been felt, and that meant everything. Ice block, pheasant beak. The ice bird launched from Naruto's palm with a scream that cracked the void. Massive. Larger than any he'd ever created. Wingspan 100 feet, body dense with absolute zero ice and every remaining ounce of armament haki he could muster, the black coating the bird's talons and beak like war paint. It flew at Kaguya. Fast. A missile made of winter and will. Kaguya raised her hand. From her palm, a bone grew, the all-killing ash bones, the technique that disintegrated anything it touched at the molecular level. The ultimate offensive jutsu, the thing that could kill anything. The bone spear and the ice bird met. The detonation whited out the dimension. A flash of pure, absolute conflict between two forces that should not have been able to interact. Molecular disintegration against molecular cessation. The absence of matter against the absence of motion. The explosion was not heat and not cold and not force. It was something beyond classification. A tear in the fabric of the dimension itself, a wound in reality that bled white light and frozen air. Naruto was thrown backward. His body shattered. Ice fragments scattering across the void, 100 pieces of him spinning through the white, each one trailing frost vapor. The ash bones effect reached some of the pieces. They didn't disintegrate. The absolute zero ice resisted molecular breakdown in the same way it resisted everything, by being too cold for molecular level processes to function. But they cracked, fractured. The fragments that were touched by the bone's effect were damaged in a way that Naruto's ice body hadn't been damaged before. But he reformed. Piece by piece, fragment by fragment, the ice pulled itself back together. Some of the pieces were smaller, some were cracked. His left hand reformed with 3 fingers instead of 5. The other 2 lost to the ash bone interaction, the ice unable to fully reconstitute where the disintegration had touched. Ice prosthetic. The missing fingers regrew, not from the original material, but from new ice drawn from the moisture in the void's air, crystallized and attached and integrated into his hand in under a second. The new fingers were slightly translucent, slightly different, but they moved, they gripped, they worked. Kaguya watched the reformation, the regrowth. The boy who had been atomized and had reassembled and had regrown what was lost, standing in the void with 5 fingers again and eyes that were open and focused and not even slightly impressed. She came for him. Fast, faster than anything he'd faced. Kaji speed, Sanin speed, the speed of something that existed partially outside of time and could move through dimensions the way a person moved through rooms. Her hand extended. The Byakugan locked onto his chakra points. All of them, every tenketsu, the mapping that the gentle fist was built on, the technique that should have shut down any chakra system with surgical precision. She struck. Her palm hit his chest, armament haki, the last of it, the absolute bottom of the reserve. The black hardening manifested not across his whole body, he didn't have enough left for that, but concentrated at the point of impact. His sternum, the spot where her gentle fist connected. A 2-inch square of hockey so dense, so concentrated, so fundamentally beyond the physical laws of this or any world, that Kaguya's fingers, the fingers of a goddess, recoiled. She pulled her hand back. The tips of her fingers were frosted, numb. The cold from the hockey-ice combination had traveled through her strike and into her hand, and for the first time in her immortal existence, Kaguya Otsutsuki felt frostbite. Her expression changed. Not confusion this time, not divine indifference. Something closer to anger, something closer to the primal ancient fury of a being that was not accustomed to being touched by things that should have been beneath her. "You are an anomaly," Kaguya said. "I've been called worse." Naruto was panting, hard. His haki was gone, fully depleted, the reserve empty, the black hardening faded to nothing. He had ice. He had his Logia body. He had observation haki, passive and always running. But the offensive power, the armament, the constructs, the overwhelming force was spent. He had one technique left. Kaguya raised both hands. 10 bone spears grew from her palms. The all-killing ash bones aimed at every vital point, designed to end this annoyance permanently. Naruto closed his eyes. Ice spear. From the ground beneath Kaguya, from the thin layer of frost that his ice age had left before she'd rotated dimension, the residual ice that still existed in the bone ash substrate, invisible and forgotten, a spear of ice erupted upward. Not large, not dramatic, a single, precise, impossibly cold lance of absolute zero ice that burst from the ground directly beneath Kaguya's feet and pierced upward through the hem of her robe. It didn't hit her body, it hit her robe. And the robe, a garment woven from dimensional fabric, a piece of clothing that existed across multiple planes of reality, froze. The ice traveled along the fabric, from hem to waist, from waist to chest, from chest to collar. The dimensional fabric froze, and because the fabric existed across dimensions, the freeze traveled with it, into the void, into the spaces between spaces, into the walls of the dimension itself. The void began to freeze, not slowly, not from a central point. Everywhere, simultaneously, as if the concept of cold had been introduced to the concept of infinity, and the two had shaken hands and agreed to cooperate. The white void turned to white ice. The bone ash turned to frozen bone ash. The walls of the dimension, which had no walls, which were infinite, developed a surface of frost. Kaguya tried to shift dimensions. The rotation that had worked before, the simple swap, the cosmic pillow flip. She reached for it. The new dimension was frozen too. The ice had traveled through the dimensional fabric, through the connections between Kaguya's personal realities, through the spaces that shouldn't have been spaces, looked into the voids between voids. Every dimension she owned, every personal reality she had created over millennia of godhood, froze. Ice time capsule. Naruto's hands were on her shoulders. When had he gotten close? She hadn't seen him move. Her Byakugan, the all-seeing eye, the eye that perceived everything in every direction, had not seen him close the distance, because he hadn't moved. He'd reformed. His body had dissolved into the ambient ice of the freezing dimension and reconstituted at her position. A transportation method that was not speed and was not teleportation, but was simply the advantage of being made of the same substance as the environment. His hands were on her shoulders. The ice spread from his palms, across her body, down her arms. The ash bones she was forming froze mid-growth. Her Byakugan veins frosted over. The Rin Sharingan on her forehead, the third eye, the source of all power, iced over last, the lid freezing shut, the pupil captured behind a lens of crystal. She was suspended, preserved, not dead. Naruto didn't kill gods. He didn't have the authority or the interest, but she was stopped. Every cell frozen, every process halted. The most powerful being in the history of the ninja world, sealed in ice by a boy who had been running on empty for the last hour and was currently standing in a dimension that was freezing solid around him. The entire dimension. Every surface, every wall, every floating bone, every particle of ash, every quantum of dimensional fabric. Ice. Naruto let go of Kaguya's shoulders. He stepped back. He looked at the frozen goddess, at the frozen dimension, at the ice that stretched to infinity in every direction. A personal reality turned into a personal glacier. Arara. His voice was barely a whisper, hoarse, exhausted. That was actually kind of tiring. The others arrived, Sasuke, Sakura, Kakashi. They found their way through the dimensional barrier, guided by the seal, by the connection, by the code that served as a beacon. They emerged into the frozen dimension and stopped. Sakura's hands went to her mouth, Sasuke's Sharingan, Rinnegan now, in one eye, the gift from a dying sage, spun once and stopped. Even the eye of the gods couldn't process the scale of what it was seeing. Kakashi looked at Naruto, at the boy who was swaying on his feet, coat frosted, fingers, two of them slightly translucent from the regrowth, trembling, at the frozen goddess behind him, at the frozen infinity around them. Naruto, Kakashi said. You froze a goddess. She was being difficult. Sakura was already moving, medical chakra in her hands, the green glow of healing, rushing toward Naruto to stabilize him. Sasuke was forming the seals, the planetary devastation seal, the technique they'd been given by the Sage of Six Paths himself, the only thing that could permanently contain Kaguya. They sealed her, together. Naruto stood still and watched while the others worked, because his part was done and the rest was for people who still had energy. The dimension began to collapse when Kaguya was sealed. The ice cracked, not from thawing, from structural failure, the dimensional fabric losing cohesion without its creator to maintain it. They moved. Kakashi's Kamui, borrowed, temporary, a gift from an old friend, opened a portal back to the real world. They fell through. The battlefield of the Fourth Great Ninja War opened up beneath them. The frozen plain, the glacial landscape, the armies of two worlds, living and dead, watching the sky as four figures dropped from a dimensional tier and landed, hard, graceless, exhausted on the ice. Naruto hit the ground and didn't get up. He lay on the ice, his ice, the glacier he'd built over a day of continuous deployment, and stared at the sky. The sky was clear, the stars were coming out, the war was over. He closed his eyes. Around him, the world processed what had happened. The Edo Tensei released, the reanimated dead returning to death, the spectral army dissolving, the legends going back to sleep. The white Zetsu army, without command, stopped moving. The frozen ones stayed frozen. The unfrozen ones collapsed, mindless, the animating force withdrawn. The war was over. Medics rushed to the fallen. Commanders barked orders. Communication links buzzed with reports and damage assessments, and the 1,000 administrative tasks that followed the end of the world. Naruto lay on the ice and slept. 2 weeks later, the ceremony happened. Konohagakure, rebuilt again, decorated again, celebrating again. The village that had broken and rebuilt so many times that the breaking and rebuilding had become part of its identity. Banners flew. Speeches were made. The allied shinobi forces were honored. The fallen were mourned. The living were thanked. There was a stage. There were dignitaries. There were 5 Kage, or their representatives, seated in places of honor. There was a crowd that stretched to the village walls, and the civilians and shinobi together, the whole population of Konoha and visitors from every nation, gathered to celebrate the end of a war and the beginning of whatever came next. Naruto Uzumaki was not at the ceremony. Kakashi looked for him. Not immediately. The ceremony ran for 3 hours. And for the first 2, Kakashi assumed Naruto was simply late, or sleeping in a corner, or frozen to a ceiling somewhere. By hour 3, when the speeches were winding down and the crowd was thinning and the sun was getting low, Kakashi excused himself from the official proceedings and went looking. He checked the park bench, empty. Frost on the slats, but no Naruto. He checked the Hokage monument, empty. Ice on the fort's head, but no boy. He checked Ichiraku Ramen. Tochi pointed upward. Kakashi climbed to the roof of the building next to the ramen shop. It was a flat roof, civilian construction, nothing special. A good view of the village. Warm in the afternoon sun, Naruto was there. On his back, coat spread under him, sleep mask down, arms at his sides. He was asleep in the sunlight, and the sunlight was warm on his face, and the frost that always formed around him was thin, thinner than usual, as if even the ice recognized that this was a moment for warmth. The village below was full of people calling his name. The Ice Demon, the hero of the Fourth War, the boy who froze a goddess, the shinobi who walked toward a tailed beast when everyone else ran away. They were calling for him, looking for him, wanting to thank him, to celebrate him, to give him the recognition that 12 years of hatred and 3 years of absence and 1 day of apocalypse had finally, irrevocably earned. He slept through it. Kakashi sat down next to him. Not close. The cold radius was still active, and Kakashi's joints didn't appreciate sub-zero temperatures like they used to. But close enough. On the same roof, under the same sky. He didn't wake Naruto, didn't try, didn't see the point. The most powerful person in the world was asleep on a roof in the afternoon sun, and the world was celebrating below him, and snow drifted lazily from a clear sky for no reason except that it felt like it should. Small flakes. Gentle. The kind that melted before they reached the ground. Warm enough to disappear, cold enough to exist, present for just long enough to be beautiful. Kakashi watched the snow, watched the village, watched the sleeping boy beside him who had frozen gods and carried friends and walked alone toward things that would break anyone else and had come out the other side. Not triumphant, not scarred, not vengeful, just tired, just tired. In the mindscape, Kurama lay in the ice cavern. The ice was different now, thinner. The hairline cracks from the war had spread, not enough to free the fox, but enough to let warmth in. Actual warmth. The first warmth in a decade. The fox's tails, still frozen individually, still splayed out like a peacock's display, twitched. Just the tips, the smallest possible movement, the first motion in 10 years, the ice yielding just enough for the fox to feel its own body again. Hey, Kurama said. Quiet. No roaring. No demands. No existential fury. No answer. Naruto was deep asleep. The real sleep. The good sleep. The kind where the mind goes dark and the body goes still, and the world can do whatever it wants because you're not in it for a while. Kurama watched his Jinchuriki sleep, watched the peace on the boy's face, watched the snow fall in the mindscape, snow that shouldn't have been there, that had no source, that drifted down from a ceiling of ice, because the boy who made the ice was dreaming. And when he dreamed, the world dreamed with him. Good night, brat, Kurama said. The ice cracked. Just a little more warmth, a little more movement. Not freedom. Not yet. But something close to it. Something that felt, if you tilted your head and squinted, almost like trust. On the roof, Kakashi sat and watched the snow fall and didn't move and didn't speak. The sun went down. The stars came out. The celebration below wound down. The crowds dispersing. The banners coming down. The village settling into the quiet that followed joy. The gentle exhale after the held breath. The snow kept falling, from a clear sky, in the middle of summer, on a village that had been through everything and was finally briefly at rest. Cold, beautiful, still. Naruto slept. The world slept with him. And for the first time in 2 lifetimes, for the first time since a man in a white coat walked across frozen oceans and called it justice, for the first time since a boy with whisker marks woke up in a world that hated him and decided to be ice instead of fire, there was nothing left to freeze. No enemies, no wars, no gods, just a roof, a sleeping boy, a quiet sky, and snow falling gently. Because that was what happened when Naruto Uzumaki dreamed. The ice stayed, and for once, just this once, that was enough.
And that's how one lazy, slouching, sleep mask-wearing ice demon dismantled the entire ninja world without ever standing up straight. If this story hit different, you already know what to do. Like, subscribe, and come back, because we're just getting started. Ara, ara. See you next time.